across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
They often say polls schmoles, but this one is rather interesting. A new poll has emerged, skewering Keir Starmer as Nigel Farage ranks above him as the people's choice for Prime Minister. This is for the first time that he personally has gone to the top slot. Keir Starmer actually dropped so much that he's just 1 point above the Green Party. Good Lord, that's how bad things have got down Keir HQ way. Also this afternoon, the migrant and sex offender mistakenly freed from prison was paid 500 quid to leave the UK, sparking fresh outrage. The Home Secretary said she shared the public's anger and pulled every lever to remove him. He was deported to Ethiopia last night. The cash was reportedly given after he threatened to disrupt his removal. Well, stick him in a bag then and put him on a plane. That's the one way around it, you might think. And Labour is now slamming the 4-day week, with the Communities Secretary blasting one local authority's permanent 100% pay for 80% hours, despite past Labour flirtations with shorter weeks and work from home. The council touts £400,000 savings, lower turnout and more applicants, yet residents report worsening housing services. Where is the sweet spot on the 4-day working week? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. This whole thing, and I'm going to ask the question just as bluntly as you can on this, which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister? Now, there is a nuance here, because often you can look at somebody and say, well, I don't support the party, but they would be a good Prime Minister. You know, back in the day, before Tony Blair went absolutely crackers, there was a sense from lots of Conservatives that he would be the best Prime Minister. Not a Labour supporter, wouldn't go near them, frankly, if they were on fire. But he's probably the best. So there is a little bit of that going on. I've never quite understood, and this latest Ipsos survey poll found the Reform UK leader was seen as a better candidate to be in charge of the country by 33% of voters. Now, bearing in mind, for about the last 10 months, Reform have been well ahead of any other party, and it's grown and grown and grown, including the current government. Obviously including the Conservatives. So Reform have been ahead, but Nigel Farage hasn't been. So bearing in mind this government's failures are so firmly bolted to the doorstep of Keir Starmer, and there's no doubt about it, you can't separate them and go, well, he's good, but the party's rubbish. There's none of that going on. This is clearly a situation where we just don't rate him or his party. But despite the lagging in the polls, despite Labour falling through the floor in the polls, up until this survey, Keir Starmer has still come out as the better leader. Now, I don't know how that works. I don't know how you say, I demand Reform form the next government, but I wish Keir Starmer was running it. It doesn't really make an awful lot of sense. However, we now know 33% of voters would prefer Nigel Farage. This compared to 30% who preferred Keir Starmer to be in Downing Street. And that close, right? And this is the kind of monthly tracking of political preferences. So it's kind of updated in a pretty instant kind of way in political terms. Keir Starmer suffered a fresh blow today as polling showed Nigel Farage is the voters' preferred choice as Prime Minister for the first time. It found the Reform UK leader was seen as a better candidate to be in charge of the country. And we also know the latest YouGov voting intention survey found Labour were supported by just 17% of voters, which is down 3 percentage points. So you've got the Tories on 17%, you've got Labour on 17%, the Greens have gone up to 16% because you've got Madman Zach in charge. How the hell would you be him and rising in the polls? I mean, this fella is, but it's the fella that wants to make dealing heroin legal but renting out your house illegal. These people are barking mad. And the Lib Dems on 15%. So the Greens are above the Lib Dems. The point is that all round, Reform UK do better, and Nigel Farage is seen as the voters' choice when it comes to who would make the best Prime Minister. Let me throw that question out directly to you. 0344 499 1000. Of course, you could be a Reform voter and think that there is a better leader that could run Reform. Many people would say Richard Tice would be their preferred choice as Prime Minister. In fact, when I think of who I could imagine doing all the statesman stuff, I can almost see Richard Tice there more instantly than I can see Nigel Farage. Weird as that sounds, but it kind of ticks all the various boxes, and there's about 5,000 you've got to tick to be Prime Minister, and that's increased in the modern age. But nonetheless, who do you think would make the UK's best Prime Minister? Which politician would make the best Prime Minister? 0344 499 1000. I'd love to hear from you if you are Team Badenoch, if you think that Kemi, despite her woes, her troubles, trials and tribulations, would still make the best Prime Minister. You might look at it this way: I don't support her party, but I think she'd be really good. Would it be Ed Davey? Silly question, ignore it, forget I ever said it. Would it be Zach Polanski, that crazed ultra-lefty dude that's running up the Green Party these days? Which UK politician would make our best leader? 0344 499 1000. Chloe Dobbs joins us in the studio to talk about this and the other big stories of the day. Afternoon to you, Chloe.
Afternoon, yeah.
It's an interesting one, this, because I was saying a second ago, it kind of fascinates me that Reform have been ahead in the polls for a long time, but not Nigel Farage. So even when Reform were ahead, Starmer was still seen as the preferred leader. How does that even work?
It's the way that they calculate the net favourability ratings. So what you find with Keir Starmer...
I didn't actually think you were going to have a serious answer to this, but you clearly have. Fire away.
So, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but typically what they will do is they'll ask people, do you like Keir Starmer, do you not like Keir Starmer, or do you just not care and you're somewhere in the middle? And what you would find with Keir Starmer is that there was a big grey area in the middle of people who are indifferent to him. So although there weren't that many people who like him, the number of dislikes to take away from that was quite small, whereas Nigel Farage is more of a Marmite kind of guy. You either love him or you hate him. So although the number of people saying they liked him was more than Keir Starmer, the overall net favourability rating would come out worse because there were so many people who are scared of him because of so many people saying he's a racist, he's a fascist. That puts people off, right?
Sure.
It would mean that he comes out worse. But this poll is different. This is a head-to-head where they've asked people, who would you prefer, Keir Starmer or Nigel Farage, and Nigel has come out on top. There also is an element as there will be people who are going to put an X in the box for Reform, but they're not necessarily particularly passionate about it, and they might not like Nigel Farage. I know some people who say, I think I'm going to vote Reform, but I'm not that keen on Nigel Farage. I think he's just got a big ego, for example, they might say. And so there is an element of that, but I think a lot of it is just that Nigel Farage is that Marmite kind of guy, not that many people who are indifferent to him, which is, when you're a big personality, that's going to be the case. If you're a bland figure like Keir Starmer, there are going to be a lot of people who are indifferent to you, and that used to help the Labour Party when they were in opposition, because he didn't look like some kind of scary figure like Corbyn did. But now that he's in power, people just feel like he has absolutely no conviction whatsoever. We have no idea what he stands for, and so he's really turning people off.
Well, let's have a listen to both of these operators in the world, in the political arena. First, this is from PMQ's Keir Starmer on Nigel Farage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the honourable member for Clacton is not here representing his constituencies in the House that he was elected to. No, he's flown to America to badmouth and talk down our country. And worse than that, Mr. Speaker, if you can believe it, he's gone there to lobby the Americans to impose sanctions on this country which will harm working people. You cannot get more unpatriotic than that. It's a disgrace.
I'm sorry, but the audacity of Starmer to have a go at Farage for missing a PMQs when Keir Starmer misses PMQs all the time to go gallivanting around the world.
Barbados or
I think he's had over 40 trips abroad since he became Prime Minister. And his latest trip will be the COP trip, where they've slashed down the whole Amazon rainforest.
Get rid of a rainforest for an environmental conference. Now let's have a listen to Nigel Farage teaching Keir Starmer a bit of a lesson.
We will teach Starmer a lesson next May that British political history will never forget. I am now, as a result of this week and the abuse that has been heaped upon our supporters and our voters, more determined than ever. Don't underestimate that.
So which of those two, Chloe, can you imagine standing there in the Oval Office or turning up at the United Nations, pressing the flesh at the G7, all of those kind of powwows that political darlings love? Starmer, Farage, Kemi, Ed Davey, Zach Polanski?
Zach Polanski, of course.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he'll be able to go there and hypnotise them and make all their breasts bigger, and he'll really give an impression,
Zach
I'm sure.
has the gift of the breast.
No, I'm joking. I mean, Nigel Farage there...
he wasn't joking when he charged somebody 50 quid for inflation. Zach wasn't joking when he charged.
What do you mean?
You've just told the story yourself about the inflatable breast. He was a therapist.
When you said inflation, I thought you were talking about prices rising. I said, what are you talking about?
No, we're talking about the literally the inflation. He promised a client, you know, you give me 50 quid.
Well, that's not very much, though, actually. That's a lot cheaper than a boob job.
Maybe it was just one.
Good value for money.
Maybe it was just one, so it's actually 100 quid. Unless there was already disproportionality. Where is this one going? But Zach, you see, Zach Polanski has done essentially what they call green populism. So he's doing over there what Nigel Farage is said to be doing over there.
Yes, well, it doesn't really take much to be more charismatic and appear more in touch with people than Keir Starmer does it. Yeah. And I mean, Keir Starmer, I think he feels like, and Rachel Reeves and the others in the cabinet feel as though where they are doing well is when they go to all these conferences around the world, because they're typically given quite a warm welcome, unlike here as they do in the House of Commons, where everyone goes for them. So I think they feel like they've been somewhat successful on their trips abroad, and that's why they're quite keen to do more of them. But nevertheless, I feel quite embarrassed having Keir Starmer being the one representing us. And also, I think when it comes to negotiations, Keir Starmer, we've sent a message to the world that we are weak negotiators. I mean, the fact that we have given the Chagos Islands away and then paid to rent our own military base back just shows how daft we are. I mean, look how the French have dealt with us. We've given them loads of money and they're stopping fewer boats than they ever did before. We're allowing everybody to take us for fools. And that is the message that is being sent to the world. But you know, if it was Nigel Farage, I'm sorry, but he's not going to put up with anything if people try to give him a bad deal.
But the problem is with that is when you get into power, and I've heard so many prime ministers say this, you know, once you're there and you think, right, I want to change this, and you suddenly realise, actually, it's not that easy. And I think there was a story of Tony Blair saying to the permanent secretary or something in the Department of Education, right, we want to do this with grammar schools, we want to do this with these schools, we want this, you know, big old list, let's make this happen. And the permanent secretary just said, Prime Minister, you want this to happen? Yeah. And he said, how long is it going to take? And the permanent secretary said, based on what you're looking for, about 17 years. It's turning an oil tanker around.
Yes.
And of course, reform voters will be particularly grumpy if stuff doesn't happen quickly, I think.
Yes, and I think that they need to be careful not to promise the world on day one. I think that they've got a lot of conviction and tenacity to give it the very best shot of taking down the so-called blob. And there are things that certainly can be done to do that, but it's going to be difficult and it is going to take time. And for example, on deportations, we will need to do things like leave the ECHR, leave the Refugee Convention. These changing legislation will take time, for example. We'll need to fire a lot of civil servants. The number of civil servants has grown massively since COVID. We also need to bring accountability back into the civil service and say, if you don't do your job and you don't do it efficiently and quickly, sorry, but you're out. Start acting a bit more like the private sector. But you're right that things move at snail pace as it stands. We've got a long way to go. I saw a video of Dominic Cummings giving a lecture yesterday where he's talking about how long it was going to take to add one lane to a dual carriageway for 18 miles. And the civil servants were saying it's going to take 35 years, and he pressed them, how can you get it down to lower? And they said, we think if we really push, we might get it down to 23 or 24 years. To add
To add a lane?
A lane to a dual carriageway.
In China, they do that in the weekend.
Planning process, judicial review, environmental regulations, and then you go and do another review and over and over and over again. And then after the end of years and years and years and all of this legality, maybe in the last 2 years, you might build this extra lane. And this was a real.
That's the kind of
this was a real. This was a real story.
It's a madness. I mean, how can it ever be like this?
I know.
Listen, we're going to talk some more in a moment, Chloe. We'll talk about that potential budget tax grab on betting. This is an outrage on the average working person if the Treasury were to go for this, who likes a little bit of a flutter. Might just be the Grand National, might be the odd Premier League match at the weekend. And the 4-day week is back on the agenda, all of that and more. And we're asking this question: which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister? Reference that latest Ipsos survey. Your response on that and associated matters: 0344 499 1000.
Can I just say, I don't know if you're going to get here, but I want to get here. Them at the Dodgers game. Who in their right mind does not take their son to a baseball game? It's Harry and Meghan sitting there in front of Magic Johnson.
That's true.
They're front row.
I never thought about that.
And why does Harry not take you know who he took to the Super Bowl? Eugenie. Why does he never take his son to these types of events?
How odd.
Isn't that strange?
What a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Gareth says, come on in, engage the brain. Far-right reform get 36% share of the vote in a by-election in socialist Wales. Yet apparently they're only getting 27% share of the vote in a national opinion poll. Conclusion, the opinion polls are nonsense. I would actually disagree with, opinion polls are pretty good these days. They are pretty good gauge. They're not 100% accurate, but the methodology, they're not always asking quite the same question. So just because something happens in one place doesn't mean to say, therefore, if that was transposed, because you've got midterm issues where people vote in ways they wouldn't necessarily vote in a general election, you've got all of those elements too. It was 1997 when the pollsters really screwed up.
Yeah, look, you should never trust one individual poll and take it as sacrosanct. But when you have had over 100 polls in a row putting reform in the lead,
correct,
I think you've got quite a bit of data there to work with. Yet there are also issues with polls asking inappropriate questions, and they don't necessarily always capture tactical voting. So, for example, when we had that mega poll saying reform might get 445 seats, I think we all know it wouldn't quite be that big because of tactical voting. We've seen that in the election in Caerphilly in Wales, where reform were in the polls on 42% and Plaid Cymru on 38%, but because of tactical voting, Plaid Cymru ended up taking that seat and beating reform, which was kind of expected if you looked a bit beyond the polls. But all in all, polls provide good data, and there's so many more of them now with more advanced methods. And as I say, if you look at lots of them rather than just one, you can't just
you can't look at one.
You can't just say, oh, reform have absolutely no chance, nobody's voting for them. And I mean, we've had some results to show that the polls are true to some degree, because there will always be some element of people on the day going for the safer option rather than what they maybe said before. You know, people might say in the past, before we had reform, they might say, well, I might give Labour a chance, but then they go on the day, actually, I better be safe and go with the Tories because I know them.
And then there's the sort of secret, it used to be the secret Tories, they used to call it, and then people would vote Conservative, but they would never tell a pollster they would vote Conservative. This comes in from Margaret in Birmingham. Says, Ian and Chloe, I think a politician that would make a good Prime Minister is Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker, of course, former...
Great man.
Yeah, lovely guy. And this is good. How about we borrow Donald Trump? He could work from home 4 days a week as well, maybe.
Well, I've been saying since Donald Trump won the election, just invade us. I used to really care about democracy, but at this point, I'm just so sick of it. I'm like, Donald Trump, just take over. He would stop the boats in a day. He stopped the illegal migrants crossing over the southern border, and they had a far bigger problem than we have, to be honest. They had millions
almost
coming across.
Come to a standstill.
And he just brought it to a standstill. Shows what a bit of conviction tenacity can do. Yes, he does have emergency powers, and it's a bit different. As we've said, reform might have a little bit more of an uphill battle, but Trump shows what can happen if you actually put your mind to things.
Let's move to this story, the budget tax grab on betting. This is... certainly there's a Sun campaign on this at the moment, urging Rachel Reeves to back down. There is certainly some proposals, left-wing think tanks proposing online gaming tax to rise from 21% to 50%, online sports betting from 15% to 25%. I mean, bookmakers already pay about 4 billion quid in taxes annually. The industry is... it's about 110,000 jobs are associated with this, but it's a classic kind of... Look, I appreciate this is only something being talked about, and that's how these policies tend to happen, but it's a classic thing. Let's go for the landlords, let's go for people who like betting, all those kind of targets that the old left absolutely loathe. They hate it. Some of their own photo, I mean, these are the metropolitan left, because, you know, the old-fashioned kind of working men's club Labour voter would have loved a flutter on the nags.
Yeah, it seems...
Leave the bookmakers alone, Rachel.
Yes, well, I mean, it's two things. First of all, she's desperate to tax anything that she can find because she's desperately trying not to break her promises to, for example, not raise income tax. I think there's quite a good chance that is still going to happen because the OBR have downgraded their productivity forecast even further, is what we're hearing.
Yeah, they have.
So she may end up with more of a 30 or 40 billion hole to fill rather than 20, as she was previously saying. But there is an ideological... I can't get my words out there. Ideological.
You were right. Ideological, yeah.
Element to this as well, right?
Yes.
So, because you saw that with the private schools, for example. I don't think that policy...
100%. Who taxes kids' education?
Yeah, and with the farmers' tax as well, which has been deeply, deeply unpopular. It was only expected to raise, I think, £500 million a year, which is absolute tuppence, right? But it was an ideological idea that you should not be able to pass wealth down to your children. And here, you know, they look at people that go and watch the horse racing and think, oh, they're quite posh. They don't need that.
Yeah,
that's a bit
of that.
Yeah, and sure, I get that it's not essential, right? Betting entertainment and horse racing, but the reality is that this does create a lot of jobs. This does generate a revenue for the economy, even if it is just a bit of fun and not essential.
Well, you've got Betfred saying that this could force 1,300 shop closures and 7,000 retail jobs to go if tax increases proceed, and there could be wider high street impacts, of course. So there's a huge amount to that, but it is very classic this government if they are going to go there. Let's move to this one. The 4-day week is back on the agenda. Chloe, South Cambridgeshire Council adopted, of course, famously, well, sort of famously, this permanent 4-day week, so you get 100% pay, but only 80% of your contracted hours. Steve Reed wrote, expressing deep disappointment, demanding explanations for deteriorating housing services, rent collection, reletting times and repair satisfaction. So you've got the council saying it's more efficient and it's working brilliantly. You've got punters saying it isn't, and many are attributing this to the 4-day week. I do have to say there's a lot of really shockingly badly run councils that still do 5 days a week. So who knows what the maths really tell us here. But I think that just the general thrust or the general subject of the 4-day week, I mean, I'm all right with it if everything stays as it is.
If it was the same or more efficient. And a lot of people thought that that was the case. There were some pilot studies done when this idea first came about, where when you initially told people you need to get 5 days worth of work done in 4 days, they became much more efficient and much more diligent with their time. But I think as it's being tried more and more, as clearly is the case with this council, it's turning out that actually people aren't quite as efficient if they're only turning up 4 days rather than 5 days. And look, I'm up for experimentation, but clearly an experiment has been done, it hasn't worked, so let's revert back to 5 days a week. I think that COVID gave us a good chance to experiment with things. There are a lot of people who, now some listeners may disagree with this and say you have to be at work 5 days a week, but I think that COVID showed that there are some benefits to home working. There are some benefits to doing a call on Zoom rather than people in business, for example, flying to a different country just to have a 1 or 2 hour meeting with somebody. And I think that hybrid working, people having maybe a Friday or maybe 2 days a week work from home, I think that that's okay, and I think it can be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the 4-day week is clearly shown not quite to work.
The basic thrust of this is meant to be that you get a more efficient and a happier work. If you have a happier workforce, then they're more efficient. People will always, respond better to, for want of a better way of looking at it, a reward. It's that human thing of, there's a reward for what you've done. And if you get that, you'll work better. I'm not so sure. I mean, I think there's loads of... I do... If it works like that, brilliant. I mean, who's anyone to tell anyone how to run their company or their business? If it's not affecting anyone and everything stays the same or improves, then we'd all go, that's a good idea. I just would imagine... I mean, if I worked... you do a bit of work from home, but you're also out and about as well. Imagine if you didn't do any out and about and you were only at home.
Yeah, I mean, I used to mostly just work at home, and it seems great to start off with, but then eventually you do start to get a bit of an itch if you're not seeing anybody.
Yeah, of course.
And it depends on the person. I know some people who work from home who are super diligent, right 9 o'clock, they've locked themselves in their office and they go for it. But then there are other people who aren't that great at staying concentrated when they don't have somebody looking over them. And so I think that companies need to judge, and you also need to hold people to account. So, I mean, you say you need to have some sort of reward to make these things work. So if you say to all of your workers, you only have to work 4 days, doesn't matter whether you perform or not. But whereas if you say to people, right, you can leave at 3 o'clock on Friday if you've met your target and you've finished everything on this list, then that is a reward. You get to leave early, right?
Just a final bit of breaking news, a comment on this. A small boat migrant, Hebe Cabdiraxman, Nur, 47, has been jailed at Derby Crown Court for life with a minimum of 25 years for stabbing a bank customer to death in the city. We saw an Afghan migrant yesterday who's been arrested. We can't say too much about that because of ongoing, but however, we know what happened with slaughter in the street, including a 14-year-old boy and a man in his 40s being killed. We know that we've just sent one character sex offender back to Ethiopia who kicked off so badly the Home Office had to give him £500, which I think you crunched the numbers on this, which translates in Ethiopian terms.
Yeah, so it's really cheap to live in Ethiopia. The average salary is 35 quid a month. So if you do the maths, we've given him the equivalent of 38 grand in Britain's money, if you look at the British average wage.
This is a sex offender.
500 quid doesn't sound like too much. If you think, oh, he'll need a little bit to just get back on his feet, you know, get a hotel or something the first few nights whilst he finds his family and travels back. But then when you realise it's the equivalent of 38 grand, given things are so cheap there, that's quite problematic. I mean, on this case that you've just mentioned of the guy being jailed, I'm absolutely sick of this. It's every single day there's a new story. I mean, what a week it has been. You've mentioned a few cases there. We've also had the guilty verdict over this past week for the Sudanese migrant who murdered Rhiannon Sky White, the hotel worker and mum of a 5-year-old who did nothing wrong, just sat there giving out snacks, being lovely to these migrants, follows her home after her shift and stabs her with a screwdriver 23 times.
How many of these cases do there have to be before somebody says, right, we've got a safety issue?
And when does Starmer, you know, they might put out a tweet saying, oh, we condemn what happened, our hearts and minds with the family. But they clearly don't see this as enough of an issue as it is. We should be acting as though this is an emergency.
Yeah, spot on. Chloe, thank you. Good to see you again. Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. Over to you on any of those stories. I mean, particularly the last one, which should... I mean, it's horrific, it's saddening, it's disappointing, but it's also infuriating because this stuff doesn't have to happen. It is politicians playing the roulette wheel with other people's lives. Responses on that, plus which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister. We'll talk to a couple of voices on that, including the legendary political commentator Adam Bolton's going to join us too. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. It's 25 to 2. So this fresh poll, bad news for Keir Starmer after he's been overtaken as the favourite to be Prime Minister by his arch nemesis, Nigel Farage. The two have been at each other's throats, of course, since Labour got into power, which is rather interesting, of course, because, you know, I don't need to tell you this, but they are not the official opposition. In fact, they only have 5 members of Parliament, and yet it appears to be a battle between Labour and the Reform Party. We'll speak to Adam Bolton in a moment, the Times radio presenter and political journalist of many decades in this world. He's seen them come, he's seen them go. First, Kieran Pedley, Director of Politics at Ipsos. Good afternoon to you, Kieran. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
Tell me about this. I know polls work different ways and different questions are not always comparable with what looks to be a sort of similar poll. So there's some, methodology, science and all the rest of it behind it. But it's interesting that for the last couple of months at least, Reform have been well ahead in quite a lot of polls, but not in the leadership department. So who are the people that think, I'm going to vote Reform, but ideally I'd like Keir Starmer as my Prime Minister?
Well, it's not so much that, actually. It's more that there are people that will vote Liberal Democrat or Greens, that when you give them a choice of the two men as Prime Minister, they might prefer Keir Starmer, even if they're voting for a different party to Labour. But you're right. I mean, we regularly poll whether the public would prefer Keir Starmer or Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. This month, we find a very slight lead for Nigel Farage, 33 points to 30. But that's quite different to where we were this time last year. Last December, Keir Starmer was 14 points ahead. So you get an idea of the way the momentum has shifted in 2025. It's
interesting. I was looking at the other aspects of this as well. And this is regularly polled, as you rightly say. Of course, it doesn't mean that will always be, it's going to completely replicate. Polling has got far more accurate over the years than it perhaps used to be. But when I was looking at another poll, sorry to mention the competition here on this one, if you don't mind, just for the purpose of this, Kieran, but YouGov looked at a poll on party voting intentions, and it had the Tories and Labour kind of neck and neck. That hasn't happened for a while, has it? Because the Tories might say, well, we'll take that, because at least it puts us level with the government, but still not good news.
I mean, I've never heard of that polling organisation, of course, but
no,
yes, there are
new guys. They're just starting out.
Just new kids on the block.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a range of voting intention figures out there from different companies. I mean, what's the consistent message is that Reform are ahead, and we can debate how far ahead that is. And in some ways, there is no correct answer until there is a general election. But what we are seeing is a breakdown in a sort of fragmentation, if you like, of the different political parties, and something of a collapse of sorts of the two main ones that we're used to forming governments, Labour and the Conservatives. I think this speaks to a wider challenge that the Labour Party have. They're being attacked from both the right and the left. They're losing support to Reform over issues like immigration directly, but also there are people on the more progressive left-wing side of politics who are shopping around and like the look of Lib Dems and a resurgent Green Party. And so the challenge, of course, for Keir Starmer is how do you square that circle? How do you traverse these two very different groups of people?
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, politicians always say, if I was sitting here now with a cabinet minister asking them to respond, it would be the same stock kind of answer. Well, we don't follow the polls. The only poll that matters and all of those things that come out will be election day, etc. But there must be, we all know there are huge numbers of people that work in government departments that are all about, trying to predict trends and where they might go and what polls are telling them, because they can, perhaps divert this way or that way in response to a poll. So it would be inaccurate to say that politicians don't listen to this stuff. They must do.
They certainly do. And I think that the important thing with polling is not just to look at the headline voting intention figure, because whilst that is important, in some ways that is the answer of where we might end up. There are things that go underneath that as well. So I think if I was going to characterise British politics at the moment, it's that immigration is the number one issue on the minds of voters. Our monthly Ipsos Issues Index asks people in their own words what the key issues are facing the country. We don't give people a list. And immigration is on 47% to the economy on 33%. And at the moment, Reform are convincingly the most trusted party on that. Now, of course, there's other dynamics going on. The economy is very important. Public services are very important too. But whilst we're in a world where immigration is the number one issue and Reform are most trusted on it, it's not surprising that we've got the headline voting intention figures that we see. Now, when you talk to the public about other issues like the economy or like public services, the parties can be neck and neck. And so if the conversation was for some reason to move on to different subjects in the future, then maybe the headline voting intention figure would change as well.
Yeah. Kieran, great to have you on. Thank you, sir. Kieran Pedley, Director of Politics at Ipsos. Let's speak to Adam Bolton, Times radio presenter. Did I use the word legendary, Adam, when I started to reference you?
You're welcome to.
How many general elections have you covered in your time?
I go back to 83, so I think that's something like 14 or something like that.
Wow, so you remember the Iron Lady standing there,
absolutely
victorious.
I do, and I have to say, we haven't seen anything like this since 83. I mean, the last time we can see an insurgent party becoming so dominant was probably the SDP, and of course when it came to the election, it wasn't necessarily borne out. But I mean, this is amazing to see a party coming from a standing start. Of course, Nigel Farage wasn't personally. To get to this dominant position in opinion polls is quite remarkable, and you know. So
what do we make of that? Because I know we live in a sort of different world. Social media is it inflames debate, and on a good day it creates some good for democracy. You could say people are more engaged than perhaps they would have been previously, but you can't really overstate it because we talk about it a lot. We lose sight of the fact a party that started half an hour ago with 5 MPs, and you rightly say Nigel Farage has been round himself for a long time, and it is very much formed, of course, in his name and his whole personality. But nonetheless, this is not. If it was the Green Party, we'd be surprised. But at least you could say, well, the Greens have been on the agenda for a long time. With Reform UK, something has shifted, the likes of which, I mean, you mentioned the SDP, but this is something more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is massive, and actually it's interesting you mentioned the Green Party, because, what we're seeing in the party, who would you vote for polls, is that the Greens are up, the Liberal Democrats are up, and obviously, of course, Reform UK is well up. And actually, in this poll, one of the questions they ask is net favourability. And what you see is Nigel Farage, he's -9, Ed Davey -7, Zach Polansky -8, so nothing really to worry about. And then you look at the two main party leaders, Kemi Badenoch -22, and you got Keir Starmer at -40. And what that really says is, as we're seeing in opinion polls, that the voters, for whatever reason, are absolutely fed up with both main parties, and they're looking elsewhere. Primarily, of course, the problem is for the Conservatives, in as much as an awful lot of their voters have gone to Reform, a smaller number of Labour voters have gone to Reform, and Labour's problem is it's losing in both directions because, as you say, the Greens are coming up. Now, this, we've not seen this before.
No.
And it really will change anything. I mean, I was sort of saying, is there any good news in this at all for Keir Starmer? And the answer is not much. I mean, he would narrowly beat Kemi Badenoch for Prime Minister in a standoff. He would lose to Nigel Farage. But, the problem is, as far as best Labour leader, he would lose to Andy Burnham.
And that's going to be that probably hurts him more than the Farage stat.
Well, I think it does, particularly since people in political circles have said Andy Burnham made a bit of an ass of himself over his challenge, but that hasn't come through to the voters. No. They just seem to want anyone but Keir. And also, what you're hearing, from Kieran there. The most astonishing finding is that the party most trusted on the economy is Reform.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to the mainstream debate, Labour and Conservative spokesmen will say, well, Reform are a bit of a joke when it comes to the economy. They haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
And yet voters are actually prepared to give them the thumbs up on that one.
It's fascinating. What could scupper Reform, though? I mean, away from this poll, just your own experience as a political journalist, Adam. I keep looking at this, and I was looking at these figures that they need to find 5,000 people to stand at the council elections and things like that. If there was a general election that suddenly popped up next week, they've got to find hundreds of candidates for this, which could result in the extraordinary situation that somebody who works in Boots today could be the Home Secretary in 7 weeks' time, because there's so few MPs to currently choose from. So, and that's not a bad thing. This is how democracy works. It's the same for any party, that you have to find new blood. But they've really got a task on their hands.
I think that, they've got an awful lot of work to do, although it has to be said they have now got, they're putting on muscle in the party organisation. They've got Zia Youssef as party organiser. They've got David Bull. They know that they've got to do this, that they've got to put on weight. And, of course, what they do have going for them is they have to be a little bit careful about who they take on. Nigel Farage likes to make out he's a bit picky, but they've got an awful lot of Tory defectors who want to come to them
Which is a double-edged sword for them, isn't it?
It's a double-edged sword, but it does mean that you've got expertise and people from politics coming in, as well as bringing voters with them. So, and in one sense, it's a disadvantage for them that we're probably, still waiting the best part of 4 years for a general election. On the other hand, it does give them time on their side to put on muscle, and if they keep on not just polling like this, but actually performing in local election and elsewhere like this, they will, I think, they'll be ready to fight an election in 4 years' time. Then we're going to get into the interesting thing of quiet pacts between parties.
Of course.
Tories and Reform may reach some kind of accommodation in some areas.
It's not going to be a complete merging, is it?
No, well, not initially. I don't think.
It might end up as that.
Well, they might end up jointly in government. I mean,
of course.
That seems to be how it could happen. And similarly, of course, we are going to see a lot of trading on the other side between Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, nationalist parties to stop the possibility of Farage becoming Prime Minister, which this poll, does say it's a real possibility. And I think everyone is taking that on board. And even listening, to Question Time today, you saw a kind of cross-party axis wanting to remind everyone about the former Reform leader in Wales who's been convicted of spying.
Yeah.
But none of that at the moment, none of that mud, if you like, seems to be sticking to Reform in the sense of pulling them down. Although, as Sir John Curtis would say, it does seem at the moment that their vote is plateauing at about 30-31%. That gives them a big advantage at the moment, but to be absolutely confident you're going to form the next government, you need to be 40% plus, and it seems that it's very, very tough for them to get more voters in that area.
And just a final point, Adam, if this goes through to next year's local elections, we have the Scottish, Welsh elections as well, various mayoralties and the like. If Labour were wiped out in that, would Keir Starmer resign?
I think it has to be a live question. I mean, there is a real possibility, I think, if this sort of poll result is borne out in those elections, I think his position will be very difficult. And just one for the political nerds, it's being pointed out that Labour changed its rules last year so you could have a leadership challenge at any point in the calendar. You don't have to wait for the annual party conference. So he's in the same position, really, as Kemi Badenoch. I mean, it's not a bad two-way bet that we won't be seeing either Kemi Badenoch or Keir Starmer fighting the next election if this kind of polling persists.
But of course, for those who pathologically hate the Labour government, there's quite a lot of people out there in that position right now. If you change the leader, that doesn't change the party. Of course, they would still continue to.
No, it doesn't change the party. And again, from Question Time today, a fairly massive development, which is Sir Keir Starmer was challenged by Kemi Badenoch. Did he stand by his pledge not to put up the main taxes, VAT, national insurance and income tax, and he ducked it? So we can assume that's coming in the budget. Now, that may be the right thing to do economically, but it's breaking the election pledge. Very, very difficult for any party to come back on breaking such a big pledge.
It wasn't just like a tiny little footnote of a pledge. I mean, this was central to all they stood for. Adam, great to see you. Thank you very much. Adam Bolton with us here on the programme. Times radio presenter, political journalist of many years, seen those elections, seen them come and seen them go, as the phrase goes. Over to you, your thoughts on all of that, plus the question, which UK politician, as far as you're concerned, would make the best Prime Minister? It might not always be the party you would vote for, curiously. 0344 499 1000.
almost there.
But it is also true that the previous Conservative government, and indeed governments from Boris Johnson down, always refused to say China was an enemy under the mistaken belief that in law an enemy is a country we are at war with. But that's not true. An enemy is a country that means to do us harm, that subverts us, that spies on us. That has been our definition of an enemy since 1911.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk. Let's go to your calls on that question. Which politician would make the best Prime Minister? This is Grace down in London. Grace, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. I spoke to Farage on a number of occasions years ago when he was on another radio station taking calls, and I got the feeling that while he's obviously charismatic and good at having a conversation, he wasn't necessarily thinking in much depth about what people were saying to him. I mean, I made the point that I make ad nauseum, so apologies for being repetitive, but he was asking about what we think about the flag, and I made the point that rather than instilling pride, the flag reminds me to some extent that there's a cross because Jesus died on a cross for our sins. So I don't feel like I want to be proud and think, oh, I'm great in being British. I want to think, actually, how can I humble myself and be a person who cares about others rather than thinking that it's great just to be British. But what he kind of fed back when I made that point, and on the other occasion...
What did he say to that?
He just said, oh, we've got a great Christian history as a country, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair interpretation of how you want to see the flag, isn't it, I suppose? In terms of how he saw it, I mean, you know, he might have had a different view to you, but does that mean he lacks depth because you fundamentally disagree with him?
It was on various occasions when I spoke to him, and often when people do talk to him, and I see him speaking, I get the feeling that he's really good at presenting some of the things that he knows some of his supporters want to hear, but seeing the feedback from some economists and some people who've previously worked with him and now broken away, including Rupert Lowe, for example, I wonder if actually deep down there's not enough strategy that will work.
So you see him more as a raconteur, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, as somebody who's very good and very fluent and very mesmeric when they speak, and they can command an audience. They've got a great voice. They can do it without writing notes. But actually, when you dig a little deeper, your sense, Grace, is that there's not enough there for you.
Exactly, and I think that what we need is a politician who will look at all of the statistical and economic details of why there are difficulties in the country, rather than only be a really good presenter. Having said that, I'm not a fan of Starmer at the moment. I do think that having a boring politician isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we do need someone who's primarily focused on resolving the problems rather than simply talking in an interesting way about them. But I personally am very angry with Starmer because he cut overseas aid, and I know that most people listening to this will think that's a good thing.
And there might be, there might be more of that to come. So just briefly, Grace, who would make a great Prime Minister then? If it's not Farage, it's not Starmer, who would it be?
I'm not sure who would make a great Prime Minister. The person who I think is at the top of my list at the moment is probably Andy Burnham, because I think he's got a better understanding of the needs of the population than Starmer does. OK, on that point, Grace, thank you very much indeed. That's the question we asked. Which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister? Norman in Dartford. Another person, not just Adam Bolton, who's been around the block. Norman has as well. What are your thoughts, Norman? Good afternoon. Maybe a different block, but what are you thinking on this, Norman?
Yeah, it's very different. Well, not because I voted Reform last time, but I believe Farage fits the bill now. People want a leader with a personality who can sell a story or sell what you're trying to do.
He can, but is that... I mean, Grace's point, as you heard, Norman, was that, yeah, that's great, but it's bluster rather than detail. I think that's the point she was making.
Well,
which might be unfair, but that's her observation.
You could say that about every politician.
100%.
I've ever heard.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah, how do you ever get to the point of going, yeah, he said that, he sounded good, his words made sense, but I don't believe him? I mean, where do we stop that game?
Well, Farage comes across pretty good, And I would say the more he does of these press conferences, that I can't see another politician in this country even attempting, where he sits there and he'll take 20 questions and he'll answer them. Without notes, he'll answer them. Now, that's a talent.
100%.
That means he's telling you what he believes, because you can't make things up on the spur of the moment if you don't believe it.
No, of course you can't. Not completely. But those that talk about snake oil salesmen and things like that, what's your response to that? That yes, he is good, but you know,
that's just very childish political talk.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I watched Streeting on the telly Sunday. I spoke to you a year ago or more about the doctor's strike. Yeah. And he came through a list of what would happen if the doctors went on strike. And I looked at him, I thought, you bloody fool, that's why they're going on strike, because he's going to do that.
Yeah, exactly that.
I marvel at them.
Yeah. There's a lot to laugh at in politicians, and so there should be. We should always... Norman, thank you for your call. I've said this forever. First position on politicians is that we shouldn't trust them until they can really prove and demonstrate otherwise. If they can do that, then, you know, they get to first base. But until that point, just assume that they're all full of hot air and you wouldn't trust them out the back mowing the grass. But once in a while one comes along and you say, yep, I believe everything that they stand for and they seem right to me. Colin says, enjoying the show. Personally, I would see Reform's Danny Kruger as the next Prime Minister. Experienced, political nous, charisma and well respected across all parties. Yeah, he'd be a big player. I know he wasn't necessarily a household name to everybody at the time, but he certainly knows how to bat when it comes to the world of politics. We'll have more on that from you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Talk. Let's get the news at 2.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yeah, welcome back. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. So much to get on with. The home of common sense. The new poll we're talking about, which has given Keir Starmer a little bit of a lashing, as Nigel Farage ranks above him as the people's choice for Prime Minister. This is the first time this has happened, but it's happened to the party, but not to Mr Farage. Starmer actually dropped so much, he was just 1 point above the Green Party. Because this Chancellor called Zelensky has come along. Zach Polanski. I suppose we could just morph it, couldn't we, to Zelensky. Perhaps he's come along and he's doing rather well, curiously. It does beg the question, which UK politician would you like to see or would make the best Prime Minister? 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, the migrant sex offender mistakenly freed from prison was paid, get this, 500 quid to leave the UK, sparking fresh outrage. The Home Secretary said she shared the public's anger and had pulled every lever to remove Hadush Kabatu, who was deported to Ethiopia last night. The cash was reportedly given after he threatened to disrupt his removal. So they went, well, don't worry, son, here's a monkey, away you go, whatever it is. Can't make that up. And the government has slashed forecasts for the amount of electricity it expects wind farms to generate in a blow, to Ed Miliband's net zero plans. Officials said they were revising down the predicted efficiency of wind turbines by more than a quarter as a result of updated modelling. The change would mean the Energy Secretary would have to pay higher subsidies to wind farms to secure the same amount of energy. This is bonkers. What is going on? Can't we just plug in our hairdryers and have done with? Apparently it's a lot trickier than that. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news. 0344 499 1000. Karen in Taunton says, PM Nige or PM Ticeman? Every day of the week, says Karen. But which one? Nige or... yeah, I'm not sure. Is Karen saying Nige or Richard Tice? Maybe both, maybe either. Somebody did make the point that Ben Habib, Ben Habib. No, nobody mentioned Ben Habib so far in the polls. I mean, it is possible there will be people who think that Ben would make the better Prime Minister. Zia Youssef, says Tim, would be good for Prime Minister. Anyone but Starmer, though. And this one from David, who says, I cannot see myself ever voting Tory again, but believe that Ian Duncan-Smith could be their only hope, says Dave in Frimley Green. Of course, Ian Duncan-Smith has previously been the Conservative Party leader, and it didn't end well. I think it might end better for him now if he did it. Just not back then. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about the 4-day week as well, the 4-day working week. Labour, who previously, as I remember, have been quite encouraging of the 4-day week. They're now cracking down on the idea, slamming the first council to have adopted it. This is South Cambridgeshire Council, who introduced the scheme, has been slated by the Community Secretary Steve Reed when he expressed his deep disappointment with the approach. So that's a kind of big turnaround from where they once were. Of course, the way this works is that staff receive 100% pay for 80% of their previous contracted hours. Nice work if you can get it, some might say. Let's speak to Joe Ryle, 4-day week campaigner. Lucky we got you on a Wednesday, I guess, Joe. I don't know what your favourite day off might be. But here it is, South Cambridgeshire Council. They said everything's tickety-boo. They said their staff are happy. They said productivity is up. They said job applications to come and work for them is through the roof. But Steve Reed and others think very differently. What do you think's gone wrong here?
Well, we think Steve Reed hasn't really looked at the evidence properly. I mean, this is the first council trial of a 4-day working week, following on from kind of hundreds and hundreds of companies in the UK that have successfully implemented 4-day working weeks in ways that have been good for the employer and good for the worker. So this was the first kind of test, if you like, in the public sector, alongside a trial that took place in Scotland last year, run by the Scottish government. Now, what both of those trials have shown is that, yes, the public sector can have, gain these advantages as well as the private sector has. It's not only been good for the well-being of staff, but also for those employers, productivity going up. And in the case of this council, they've actually saved taxpayers' money. They've saved £400,000 a year because their job recruitment and job retention is much better. So I'm really disappointed. We're really disappointed in the government. We think they've kind of ignored the evidence and have got this wrong.
I mean, it is, I suppose, how you crunch the numbers, and people will see things in different ways, and some of that largely depends on where they sit politically and the like. I mean, they claim that they've had improved services, but of course, I'm sure South Cambridgeshire is a lovely place to be, and everything's tickety-boo over there. But most local authorities, you ask anyone about their local authority, whether it's about potholes, bins, lampposts, anything else, most, I think, would suggest that there is massive room for improvement from their local council. So you could say they're starting from a very low base on this kind of stuff. And you could, I suppose, argue in some respects, Joe, that until, this is local authorities, it's not the chocolate factory around the corner or the woman who owns the wool shop who are completely independent, it's up to them. It's taxpayers' money, and people want to see a return for their money. And if this was the pattern and it was proven over a longer period of time and across more local authorities, maybe it would have a little more merit. At the moment, a lot of constituents just simply see services not working and local civil servants agitating to work less hours.
Well, that's why basically all we're calling for is more trials. We want to see the kind of next wave of council trials get underway because, there are trials that have already taken place across Europe, and we do work much longer full-time hours than most of the rest of Europe, and we don't think this is, not good for workers in terms of well-being, but also not good for the economy. Having millions of workers that are kind of burnt out, stressed, overworked doesn't produce good results for anyone. So, I also agree, you're right, councils are struggling, council performance isn't great across the whole country, but it's interesting that in the case of this first 4-day week council, they're actually in the top quarter in terms of performance, so they're performing much better than the rest of other councils. So on that basis, you'd assume, well, why don't we be a bit open to this? Why don't we see if we can do some more trials, get some more evidence, see what can happen? And it just seems ridiculous for the government to shut this down when it has been so positive.
Yeah, as you rightly say, this was the government that were very, very positive about 4-day working weeks, and then they got into power and it all changed. Joe, thank you. Joe Ryle, 4-day week campaigner, thank you to him. George Madgwick is the Reform UK leader of Portsmouth City Council. George, good afternoon to you. So nice to have you with us. So your council there, 4-day a week, 5-day a week? I'm sure you work 7.
7 would be nice. No, we're currently a 5-day a week. But it's interesting what you just said, actually, because you're right. Labour, even locally here in Portsmouth, have been touting for a 4-day week for years. So it's really interesting that the government have now taken this stance on cracking down on that.
So in terms of, many people just simply say, George, look, the workplace is different. We live in a kind of digital world. So, the stuff you can do at home that you could never have done before. So I know that's a slightly different argument. If you're on a 4-day week, you don't have to do stuff from home, but it kind of all feeds into the same subject. So we have to get used to the fact that things change. Once upon a time, it was crazy that anybody would not work at the weekend. And people, I'm sure, back in the day, did 7 days a week and goodness knows what else. So things change and we've all got to get used to it. Any merits in that?
Listen, the world doesn't stop, right? Every day of the week, people have still got issues, people have still got problems, and a council is there. You're paying your council tax for a service to have access to these services throughout the week. And I think that already people struggle getting out of hours help at weekends, and people still do have problems at weekends. There is still things, burst pipes in council areas. There's still social housing issues. There's still people made homeless at weekends. These issues still exist, but the council is already closed. And our council at the moment take a softer stance on a Friday, so there is less officers in on a Friday. It's not a 4-day working week, but people can work from home and more flexibly. But already we've noticed a problem with our customers, with our local taxpayers, that have found the issue with that service not being there for them. And that is the root cause here. We're providing a service. This isn't a private company like a hospitality business or something like that where you've got the flexibility.
100%.
We're providing a public service, and a public service needs to be available when the public need it.
And you just hit the nail on the head with that term, taxpayers, because that's ultimately what I think politicians over the years have completely forgotten about, who pays their wages and what we're paying them for. We know that local authorities are really under the cosh financially. It doesn't matter where even if you're running it rather well, there's still huge difficulties in getting the right funding for a multitude of projects. Everybody wants a piece of the pie, whether it's potholes, whether it's bins, whether it's, you know, your high street Christmas decorations, all manner of things to consider. So there's this kind of an optics thing as well about this, isn't there, George? If stuff isn't working as efficiently as it should do, and your council don't go to work for a fifth of the week, that's a terrible look for the taxpayer.
Yeah, it's not good. And I think the other thing that we need to highlight here is the local economy. A lot of the local economy around council buildings has been built up with shops, restaurants, bars, everything like that, services to provide those council staff those services. And during COVID, we noted, especially in London, where local hospitality industry absolutely got destroyed by people working from home. And in Portsmouth, we got like 1,500 officers that work from our building. If we then cut that down on a Friday, that would be a dramatic loss to the local economy. The only nuanced point here is what your previous commentator said, is that councils do have a real problem maintaining and recruiting staff. It's a real difficult time right now, because why would you be a solicitor in, say, a council building for 80,000 a year when you can go into the city and get the same job for $250,000 a year? You know, so there is a real big issue with retention, but that I don't think can be solved by a 4-day week.
Great to have you on, George. Thank you for your time. George Madgwick, he is the Reform UK leader of Portsmouth City Council. Very hesitant about the idea on this one. Just run over with me. I do find these conversations quite fascinating in terms of the hours you work and how it can change. And many people listening to this will be working in jobs where it would be literally impossible. I mean, just impossible certainly impossible to work from home, but also impossible just to reduce their hours. Or they don't work for organisations where that could begin to function in any kind of efficient way. But I'm simultaneously aware that the kind of work day, the schedule, if you like, has completely changed. It's changed in lots of ways. It even started to change before COVID. I mean, that was the big accelerator of all of this. But I had a mate round the corner from me who started to do, I think he worked from home on Friday or did half day on Friday. There was something like that. And that was, you know, a good few years before COVID set in. It was already becoming a thing as many workplaces realised, and I guess it's dependent on the workplace, that they function better because the staff are a little happier and everyone all round was a winner. Is that your experience? Do you like the idea that you don't work Fridays or Mondays in some jobs? I mean, my railway station car park is dead on those 2 days because people like to do a 4-day week or a 3-day week, and the rest they do from home. Let's get a voice note on this very issue from Ken.
If the public sector can increase productivity working a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week, they're not working hard enough on a 5-day week. We all know that public sector services are not up to scratch. This sort of proves that they're not working hard enough.
Not working hard enough. Your responses on that, 0344 499 1000. More calls from you on the way. More comments where you can voice note us there as well. We've got Kinsey Schofield coming in to join us to talk about what it's to do with Christmas and it's to do with a certain duchess. You ain't going to believe this. It's coming next on Talk.
But it is also true that the previous Conservative government, and indeed governments from Boris Johnson down, always refused to say China was an enemy under the mistaken belief that in law an enemy is a country we are at war with. But that's not true. An enemy is a country that means to do us harm, that subverts us, that spies on us. That has been our definition of an enemy since 1911.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 20 minutes after 2 o'clock. Now, as more and more dirt comes out about Prince Andrew's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, something else is happening in royal circles. Meghan Markle has decided to launch her As Ever Christmas collection. The candles, by the way, are $64 if you want to buy one of these. Frankly, I can't get out of bed in the morning unless I know that Meghan has developed a new product or TV show. Kinsey Schofield joins us, host of Kinsey Unfiltered. She's not in the States. She's not on a plane. She's live here in the studio, literally wearing a Union Jack.
Well, yes, I love your country. I'm so excited to be here. Can I tell you, though, there is some other breaking news out of the States involving Meghan. They appeared at the Dodgers game. They had very expensive seats sitting in front of, like, you know, Magic Johnson and you know, very important individuals. Yeah. So we all know that high-profile seats. When the camera panned to them on the big screen, there were boos, and Prince Harry awkwardly laughed and reacted to it. I think that it's probably, this was just a way for them to promote Meghan's new products launching, like, you know, trying to be out and about, but not a great reflection on their popularity to be booed in a big stadium in an event like that.
I thought you were going to say it was going to be the kind of, when the camera panned, it was that Coldplay moment, you know, with the CEO, and there was going to be, I don't know, maybe Meghan snogging Ellen DeGeneres or something, you know. That would have been a great story.
You're right. That's the better. That's a better version.
Unfortunately, I can't unsee that now, so I apologise for even raising that, particularly if it's your lunchtime. So Meghan doesn't miss a trick when it comes to, you know, here's another way to commercialise the fact that I am not a member of the royal family, but I actually will keep telling people I am because I have titles and that's my only way of essentially having an income, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, when she was teasing this drop, first of all, she said, save the date, October 28th. Are you getting married? Yeah. I mean, that's a very, save the date. That's a commitment she's asking for, that we save this date. Yeah. And then I think a lot of us were a bit disappointed to find out that the ultimate drop was you could buy a package of loose fruit spread to put under the tree this holiday season, or $64 candles, or an $89, it's not just an $89 bottle of wine. If you want to save on shipping, you have to buy huge packs of it, and so now you're spending like $800 on bottles of wine so that you can save on shipping. I don't think that Meghan understands her true audience. I don't think she understands the type of people, like, because she does have fans. We'd be lying if we said she didn't, but I don't think it's the market she's trying to appeal to.
But, well, indeed, because I don't know what the demographic is of a Meghan Markle fan, but I do wonder, when you're putting together your kind of, you know, what you need for Christmas and stuff, did anybody like go, well, we've got the list, we've got the chocolates, we've got the turkey, we've got, we haven't ordered the Meghan Markle wine. No one ever said that, did they? There's no one out there that's desperately looking for a bit of Markle fizz.
Who wants slimy jam under the tree this holiday season? That's not something that
jam,
she does. She does. She does have a Christmas/holiday special coming out in November, so I'm sure we'll see some of these potentially. I mean, nothing is organized when it comes to everything that's we've seen unroll when it's associated with As Ever. I'd like to tell you that the Christmas special will feature some of these products, but I'm actually not very confident in that, knowing that she probably filmed it months ago in someone else's home. But we also have a Christmas special to look forward to.
A Christmas to look forward to. And of course, it's it saddens me really, because this came up the other day when Meghan and Harry first came on the scene as, you know, this was his new girlfriend, and she turned up and they said, you know, this is great progress for the royal family. She was, by the way, nobody thought Meghan Markle was anything but a white woman forever.
No, this is facts.
Yeah, that's just a fact.
Well, if you look at her Los Angeles resume as an actress, she also says she's Caucasian. So yes.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes.
So nobody ever thought that. So the idea that this was all steeped in racism against her is absolute nonsense, as we all know. But that's an argument that, you know, clearly she and others like to make. But my point, Kinsey, was going to be this. When they first set up on the scene, I thought, wow, this is brilliant. This is going to be, you know, two young people, two good-looking people, and it's going to be the new face of the royal family. It's exactly what they need. They need to. They'll be the kind of Instagram royal family for the first time, and then it all just fell apart and went to mush. And now, and I was speaking to another royal expert.
Well, you're cheating on me
this week. I do apologise for that. Yeah, it was only Rupert, you know.
Oh,
Rupert,
okay, we love Rupert.
So yeah, I bumped into Rupert the other. We were saying, where are the people? We were actually talking about Prince Andrew, which we'll come on to. Where are all of the kind of Harry and Meghan friends that come out and have told a different story against the ones that appear quite relentlessly in the press? They're not there. No one comes out in big defence.
Remember,
where have they gone? Yes.
I don't think that they're friends anymore. I imagine that she's cut them off. But she had a girlfriend, and I apologize that I'm forgetting the actress's name, but she's on the show, The Morning Show. She plays like the weather girl on The Morning Show, which currently is on Apple Plus.
The Jennifer Aniston show.
Yes. Yeah. One of her good friends was on that show, and she went on this morning here with Philip Schofield and Holly at the time and defended Meghan Markle. She's actually the person that snapped that Christmas photo of Harry and Meghan and Archie crawling towards the camera. Where is she? She's completely stopped talking about them. Nick Jonas's wife used to defend them. She doesn't anymore. Chrissy Teigen gave this bizarre, who appeared on With Love Season 2, gave this bizarre interview with People magazine within the last 2 weeks where she said Meghan Markle is a polarizing character. If you're my friend, you're going to say, oh, she's misunderstood. You just don't know her like I do. You don't go like, she's polarizing.
Yeah, it's just utterly bizarre how they went from that to that. And I know, you know, I don't dispute it's probably a pretty tough gig being in the royal family. I know it looks like, you know, quite opulence and castles and goodness knows what else. You live your life in this very strange world. I can see how that can very quickly become difficult. You know, you are never for the rest of your life ever going to walk in a shop again. Not even, you can't even do it incognito, as you know, pretending you're. It's going to be. I get all of that, but the way this happened and the way we're at now, and now you see somebody who quite clearly, you know, she wouldn't be doing this line of work if she'd stopped acting when she finished in Suits. She wouldn't be flogging, as we would say, wine and candles. Because we would say, well, why would you buy... She was in Suits, she was all right, but, you know, it wouldn't work. She's only doing this because she's on the coattails of the royal family, right?
And look at some of the products the king sells through Highgrove. They're identical, but, you know, the difference is the majority of the products that the royal family sell that are similar to Meghan's, that goes to charity. That money goes to charity, where Meghan is, this is all going to Meghan and Netflix. Yeah. And you wonder how much involvement really there is when it comes to Netflix, because the way that this has all been executed is so poor. I just did a documentary about Meghan, and the production team bought every product that they could because they wanted it to be a part of the production. And weeks later, they received an email saying that the majority of the products they ordered weren't actually available. Would you like a refund, or would you like to wait till a later date until you can actually receive the product? If I'm a first-time buyer, that's not a great first impression for me.
So these candles might not even exist. That's the great thing. They might not even be real, but they're saying they are. Just a word on Prince Andrew. I mean, we can talk about person non grata, but we know that he found himself this weekend just gone, you know, again, another layer, another sordid chapter when this photograph appeared of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein, and Weinstein was on there as well. I mean, these are not the nicest, these are not the people you want on your Christmas list, right?
No, absolutely not. You are who you associate with.
Two sex offenders, and a facilitator of sex offenders.
Well, that's what that's the biggest issue when it comes to Prince Andrew. When is the tumor going to stop growing? What will come out next? You know, not to be conspiracy theorists, but we've heard for years that tapes exist of people that were inside Epstein's home, that he potentially kept these tapes for blackmail. What else could exist exist out there that the United States government hasn't released on Jeffrey Epstein. I think that the king needs to be a little bit more aggressive to save himself from any further
100%.
humiliation.
Is there, I mean, this Epstein list, because every now and again I hear there is a list, and then somebody says...
Well, to be fair, Donald Trump's government told us that the list was on Pam Bondi's desk.
That's right. They said it's on the list is there.
Yeah.
But I mean, is there actually a list? Because this whole story, which is in nowhere defence of Epstein, obviously, but the curious bit that this industrial scale abuse took place over years, and the only person in jail is a woman. Who worked for him.
Right.
Now, where are all the names? And it's a bit like, I'm trying to think of where there was a previous list that somebody came out with or something. It got to the point where the internet was just adding names to it.
Right.
So, like, literally everyone that ever existed
Or
that
ever
had been
crossed
on
paths,
been on the TV.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, anyone who visited his island, which I'm sure for 90% of the time was just a place they did business, but they also had these kind of curious parties and the like. So it's hard to know if does this list exist? They said it did. They haven't released it now, but what is the status of that?
Well, I mean, there are people in the United States that say that Prince Andrew is the scapegoat, and why, you know, are we using this as a distraction to protect people like Bill Clinton or, you know, potentially Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Both of those men say it was completely innocent, by the way. I mean, Trump says he doesn't even know the guy, but there is evidence to prove otherwise. So there has to be an existing list by someone. So, I mean, is it a little black book? Perhaps it's just a little black book. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if Jeffrey Epstein was doing all of this to blackmail people or to have some sort of control over people, I have to believe that there is evidence somewhere that he kept organized where, you know, that blackmail material is.
And the list is interesting, the kind of people that are right. Stephen Hawking was on the list.
Oh my gosh, I know. Bill Gates, who owns most of our farmland all over the United States.
Yeah, he's just bought up all the farms, all the cows. He's got a disproportionate amount of bovine collection there. But yet Stephen Hawking, I mean, I don't understand. I mean,
well, you hear that name and you go, okay, just because you're on the list, it might not necessarily mean you did anything nefarious. Maybe you just you showed up to a dinner party.
I don't imagine Stephen Hawking was big on the orgy scene.
You know,
I'm just
I think that's a great
putting that
point.
out there.
Thank
it
you.
doesn't seem to work for me.
Yeah.
But there was clearly something going on, and there are still some victims. But even there, we have some lawyers representing some of those victims, and I don't know how many there are. I would have thought we would be hearing from more of them by now. Maybe that's just a matter of time. I know it's not easy to come forward if you've been a victim
but
in that respect.
There are people that are really concerned for their safety and their family's safeties. I mean, these are some of the names we've mentioned so far are really powerful individuals.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, isn't it? Because you think, am I really going to drop a former president in this?
Right.
Know, because that could have, or who knows?
Do I have to leave the country?
Do I have to leave the country? Do I have to change my locks? You know, and goodness knows what else. Listen, Kinsey, thank you. Good to see you. Enjoy the rest of the UK. How long are you in the UK for?
Until this weekend.
Until this weekend. I'm sure amazing things are going to happen. Kinsey Schofield with us on the programme. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Now, the government has slashed forecasts for the amount of electricity it expects wind farms to generate. Bit of a blow to Ed Miliband's net zero plans. Didn't the Energy Secretary of State state that these were going to give us, remember it well, cheap energy and save the world? Don't take my word for it. Here's the man himself.
And what I'm talking about today is absolutely part of the mission for growth of this government, because I'm here at a wind turbine factory here in Hull, employing 1,300 people, and honestly, the future is being built at this factory. The future of our country, the future of our energy system, the future of a growing economy, and I think that's what's so exciting about what we're doing today. We're talking about an age of clean electricity, which can give us energy security, lower bills, good jobs and growth, and tackle the climate crisis. So we're not just talking about it, we've got a plan to make it happen.
Well, that seems to have somehow come off the tracks. Maurice Cousins is campaign director at Net Zero Watch. Maurice, afternoon to you. There was a lot of blaze and fireworks around these kind of policies before they got into government. Since they've been in power, Ed Miliband's not stopped talking about it. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, which, by the way, we all know is a bit of a lie. But nonetheless, the big central point was that this is going to be cheaper, and it's wind that's going to do it. And today we learn they are actually slashing the forecast for the amount of electricity that it expects wind farms to generate. What has gone wrong? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yes, it's been a dreadful few weeks. Actually, we're seeing an increasing number of stories which show that the government's sort of case for net zero has always been based really on sort of shaky foundations. And today is yet another example of where we hear figures that actually they've had to slash the load factor by about a quarter. It's basically saying that wind is not as reliable as previously claimed. And what this now means is that the official forecasts used by Parliament, the Climate Change Committee, even parts of the media that have claimed that net zero is feasible and affordable has actually now just shot up by hundreds of billions of pounds. And the case that net zero can be done affordably is crumbling, and this is just yet another example of that.
Yeah, and is this down, do you sense, Maurice, that it's like a lot of things in life, stuff that's invented or released onto the market too soon, or for want of a better way? Is it that, maybe in years to come we could, have this dream where the wind, literally free energy, would not only, it would blow beautifully in the fields, they'd have modified the wind turbines so they didn't look like big old horror stories in the countryside, so they would look acceptable, and it would blow, and not just that, they'd have a little device which could store that energy as well and dispense it, and it's free. I mean, what a wonderful way to live. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be possible at some point, maybe in 156 years' time it might be, but right now this just feels like, do you remember when Bluetooth was first invented, and it seemed like a good idea, just didn't bloody work, and it seems that we're in a similar territory with these.
I wish what you said there was true, Ian. I really do, but unfortunately, I don't think it ever will be. And the reality is that the problem with a lot of this is that renewable energy is ultimately physically constrained. That is the real challenge here. What we have got is essentially low density intermittent forms of power generation. So relative to high density, more reliable forms of power generation, it is always going to be at a physical disadvantage to those other forms. So relative to, say things like gas, but also things like nuclear. So it doesn't always have to be fossil fuel generators. So this isn't necessarily a technological or innovation a challenge. It is a physical challenge, one that is ultimately governed by the laws of thermodynamics, and we're never going to be able to alter that reality, sadly.
What about the argument that comes forward from the kind of green lobby, I suppose, is that, yep, it's not providing all of our electricity, but it is providing some of it, and it never purported to provide all of it, so some of it is better than none of it. Does that argument stack up?
I think there is some truth in that. I don't think that we should do with that if you look at, say, countries like China, or even, for example, say like the UAE, they are developing grids where they are having sort of sprinklings on the top which come from renewables, and so that you can have some generation that comes from it. But ultimately, the base of your grid needs to be firm, dense, reliable sources of generation. So that's really going to be things like gas, nuclear, and historically for this country it was coal, but we phased that out for understandable reasons. But it's reliable and it's dense and it can deliver affordable sources of power.
And it's interesting that you mentioned nuclear there, which at one point the government wouldn't even talk about or entertain. And if they'd got to grips with it, even when the coalition were in power, we would right now be sitting here with an entire web of nuclear generators, rather than the stuff that is mostly owned by the French. We're making no money out of what we do have here. We would have that. But of course, they said no. And then yet almost another calamitous moment in their energy policy, or their certainly green policies, because they keep doing things that you think would make Ed Miliband discombobulate and run out the room, like expanding airports and looking at oil fields and stuff. But, never threaten to take a red box away from a man with a bit of power, because they'll stay whatever the changing story is. And of course, we then heard Miliband himself, I think it was, talking about, if Labour were running Scotland, they'd look at nuclear as a possibility there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real tragedy that we've not pursued nuclear over the decades. It is a clean source of power, and it is very dense and secure. It's a tragedy that we have over-regulated it as a sector for a while now. So I think that there's been some research done by Britain Remade that has found that I think we're the most expensive country in the world for new nuclear generation. We often seem to top the wrong league tables when it comes to energy. The most expensive industrial energy prices, the most expensive place to build this stuff. So yes, we need to get a crack on with all of it. But the way to do that is to slash some of the unnecessary and burdensome regulation around it.
Yeah, and you'd think anybody could work that out, but it seems beyond the wit of some of our parliamentarians. Morris, great to have you on. Nice to speak. Morris Cousins is the campaign director at Net Zero Watch. You want to respond to what he just said? 0344 499 1000. Loads we're talking about here, including the question we began with about which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister. Reference this new survey that has put Farage for the first time above Keir Starmer. Shirley is in the Cotswolds. Afternoon to you, Shirley. What are you making of this?
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, I've got one word for the next leader, whoever that may be, and it's to inject some humour into our politics, because life is so heavy for everyone under Labour. We wake up every morning to some bad news or threats of what they're going to do that they didn't say that they were going to do in the manifesto. Children are being taught stuff in schools that they don't need to know. The list goes on. And when you're watching, I watch Nigel Farage on TV, and he loves to have a laugh. He loves to have a beer, and he just lightens the load. And Donald Trump, love him or hate him, when you're feeling down, when he comes on TV doing his little dance, or you can laugh at his orange face or his hairstyle, it just lightens the load. And humour is really lacking in this country at the moment. Yep. It's very, very heavy. And I think a lot of people are saying the same thing. You started this conversation by saying you got one word. That was 317 you just gave us there. I know. But I think you're right. The word you were looking for was humour, wasn't it? And you're right. I mean, we do need a bit. But isn't the other one passion as well? Where you want to... you want to see a politician speak as if they really believe it. And what we hear a lot of politicians in this country just speaking off a script. And it doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound like they're motivated by their own words. It doesn't sound half the time they even believe it. There's no kind of, as I keep using the example, a burning furnace of anger or incredulity in the pit of their belly. There's none of that. You get it. You do hear it with Trump, and you hear it with Nigel Farage. Yeah, and that's what got Sarah Potion in trouble, because she just spoke with passion. And unfortunately, she went on to a radio show and she took questions from an audience of the public. She didn't have any idea what they were going to ask her, and I don't know any other ministers that do that. And she got herself in trouble just through speaking like a normal person.
Yeah, it was like, as Nigel Farage himself said, it was a kind of not the best choice of words, the way she phrased. What she was talking about was absolutely fine, by the way. There's nothing wrong with what she said. But, of course, that's got lost, and the left have decided that, this is a perfect example of racism, when it's actually a really bad example of racism, because, firstly, it doesn't in any way define what racism is. You might not have liked her words. It's nothing like that. But of course, it doesn't stop your opposition and your opponents trying to make some dollars out of it.
Yeah, let's just get back to having a laugh.
Yeah, that's what we need. Bit of humour. Shirley, thank you very much indeed. That's Shirley in the Cotswolds. One in from Neil. Scrap the net zero nonsense now, as the UK has just stabilised fusion, which they reckon will be online by 2040. I like it. Thank you, Neil. Adam says, I already work 4 days a week. The trouble is I have to work 2 evenings elsewhere so I can afford to live. That's a good point. Don in Chelmsford, in local government, it is possible to work less hours already. Arrive at the office, get a coffee, discuss last night's football or soaps, take a newspaper into the loo, take a long lunch break. Hey, time to go home. Oh, there's a lot of that stuff going on. Nick's down in London on Prime Ministers, or Best Prime Ministers. Nick, hello.
Hello, Ian. I hope you're well.
All good.
You've almost stolen my thunder a minute ago. What I want from a Prime Minister is someone with an idea of what they want to achieve, some kind of underlying a set they're aiming at, goals they want to achieve, rather than someone who I fear follows polls or whatever prevailing political winds blow them, who just say stuff for the sake of saying it, rather effect, rather than they actually mean it. I don't know what the single word is, and I don't think much that I wasn't a fan. At least with Tony Blair, Tony Blair had something. He knew where he wanted the country to go. Wrong, all right, but he did. Margaret Thatcher too, but I can't think of anyone else since that time who's had that. They've all been chances is perhaps strong, but they're there for themselves rather than there for the country.
100%, and it's that bit that's kind of been missing from our politics. And when you think about it, the best example, I suppose, is when David Cameron came in. He kind of thought, all I've got to do is sort of do a bit of an impression of Tony Blair. I'll be a bit like Tony Blair. So I'll copy somebody who, let's be honest, might have been quite efficient in his early days, wasn't somebody that has that same philosophical kind of furnace that I talked about. And Cameron thought, well, if I do that, then people will love me. And that's where we've been at, in this kind of almost a race for mediocrity, and that's what we've ended up with. Nick, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Great calls on this one. More comment on the way. Voice of Doom with us shortly, and that betting story that should disturb anyone who likes a bit of a flutter, coming next on Talk.
Can I just say, I don't know if you're going to get here, but I want to get here. Them at the Dodgers game. Who in their right mind does not take their son to a baseball game? It's Harry and Meghan sitting there in front of Magic Johnson.
That's true.
They're front row.
I never thought about that.
And why does Harry not take you know who he took to the Super Bowl? Eugenie. Why does he never take his son to these types of events?
How odd.
Isn't that strange?
What a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 10 to 3, just before we talk about betting. And there's a lot to talk about in the world of current world of betting and what might happen to it. We have day 3 of the Voice of Doom. This is the mystery voice with a political angle to it, so you're looking essentially for a politician, young or old, dead or alive, past, present, all of the above. Very simple question. Who is this?
Took the decision.
We reckon that's the hardest one we've ever done. We've said that a lot of times and the thing's, bang, been gone like that. Here it is again.
Took the decision.
If you think you know who that is, 87222, only message. If you want to take part, it's up to you. 87222 if you know who this is.
Took the decision.
And if we get a right answer, of course, we will tell you after the news at 3 o'clock. Now, The Sun is urging Chancellor Rachel Reeves to save our bets and scrap plans to hike betting taxes, warning of a budget bloodbath, with duty rises of up to 138% hitting millions of punters. Now, of course, these things are always under consideration, as a Treasury person might say. But nonetheless, the story is out there, and my political antenna tells me that when a story is out there, it's been put out there for good reason, so that we'll have a little chinwag, and then they'll stick their finger in the air and see which way the wind blows. Steve Hawkes, Head of External Affairs at Flutter UK, is with us, the world's leading online sports betting and iGaming operator, also a former political journalist as well, Steve, so you're aware of how these things tend to work. The fact that we're having a chat about this means somebody wants us to.
Well, I think the Sun obviously wants us to have a debate about it, and I think it's about time, because I think so long, for so much of this year, much of the debate around betting and gaming and gambling has been driven by people who don't like it.
Yes,
and
true.
what's been reassuring from the Sun today is to see the voice of your viewer, the reader, their reader, and the working class voter and our customer, which has been overlooked for too long.
And it looks as if, and you know this as well from your previous world of covering elections and politics, you know, they have that little file that sits there in the Treasury that says, you know, dare you go there, whether it's a Cornish pasty or a caravan when it comes to taxation. And here they are in the world of betting. We know they went for kids' education in private schools, but this is particularly irksome because, of course, I can see sort of the left-wing mind of a spad over there at the Treasury thinking, yeah, what about those rich horse race owners and, you know, all those, you know, Paddy Power and all these kind of characters, you know, they deserve to have the pants taxed off them. Forgetting spectacularly, this is a working man's activity, you know, pastime, a flutter, if you like. Who's going to score the next goal in the Plymouth Argyle match? You know, who's going to win the Grand National, famously the area where many people like a flutter. This is why this is problematic, of course, because it, as all these things do, Steve, as you well know, it hits the working man.
Yeah, I think that's what the Sun is talking about, and obviously, look, you know, it was great to see, as I say. I think, look, Rachel Reeves has a huge problem. Much of it, economists would say, has partly been her own making, partly the global situation, etc. And obviously she'll be looking, and her advisors will be looking at what they can do. And in her defence, Jeremy Hunt, if we remember him, started off this consultation into gambling tax last year. I think what we would say as a sector is that, you know, we are already heavily taxed. We're already heavily regulated. We're a legal, licensed, regulated industry. It was just 2 years ago now. We had the Gambling Act review, which introduced 62 work streams, which are still dealing through. It introduced the concept of affordability checks. For the first time, the regulator would like to make a decision on how much customers can spend on the activity of betting. We had slot limits that were reduced to £5 and £2. We had financial vulnerability checks, and all this talk about taxing more, I would argue, is coming from people who just don't like gambling. They don't like betting. They don't like it. And the danger is, and of course, yes, we would say this, but people see a tax on business as a free hit. You can tax business more, it doesn't matter. It does matter, it's not a free hit. Businesses employ people, they invest back in Britain, and if you hit us, then you drive people into the arms of the black market. Again, people will say we're scaremongering, but the black market now accounts for 9% of the UK gambling market. It has trebled in size in the past 3 years, and that's what people need to think about, the consequences of what they're talking about here, which, as you've said yourself, a tax rise of up to 138%.
Yeah, and I sense that the very people that are probably behind this, or this suggestion, shall we say, to be generous, are, as you rightly mentioned there, Steve, that they're people who don't like gambling, but they're also quite lazy thinkers, because this is sort of easy target territory, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's not philosophically driven where someone has sort of quantified the mathematical equation. It's just like, oh, that's an easy one. Like petrol is an easy one, always is, and this is in a similar territory.
Well, I think it's definitely and wrongly seen as an easy hit, yeah. I think politically, again, I presume the Labour government and the Treasury will be thinking, well, who could we hit without getting much of a backlash? And they've seen today that obviously there is a portion of the population that will speak out about it and will react. And I think that's our job. It's to be factual, to be, you know, to give the facts and say, look, this will have an impact. And you know, it's good to see, because then obviously we've been in the Sun today and we're talking about this, and I'm sure this will continue in good old-fashioned Sun style for the next few weeks. Yeah. And hopefully there can be a debate about it, because as I say, at the moment it's been too one-sided. And you've seen in the Sun today, I'd urge people especially to go out and buy today's edition, or even look online. There's a really good double-page spread, for example, about, you know, betting shops and the role they play in communities, and it's one of those things that's overlooked.
Yeah. Stick it up for your punter, says the headline, which, as you will well remember, is also a play on a previous headline, but that's another.
Exactly. We're both old enough to remember it. Yeah.
Indeed, which was an absolute beauty then, and it is now. What is your political antenna telling you on this, Steve, in terms of where this is at? Is it a bit more than a consideration? Are they looking at this seriously?
I think. I mean, look, I wouldn't. I mean, I think the Treasury's looking at everything seriously. I think they're in a, you know, they're in a tough job, right? I mean, I think, you know, when you're looking at maybe trying to raise £30 billion in one day, it doesn't look as though they have the ability with the backbenches in Labour to cut, to tackle spending. Correct. And so they come back and they have to tax. Yeah. And then is she going to, you know, the reports today that, you know, it seems as though from PMQs as though the pledge not to tackle, you know, not to raise income tax or VAT might be going. So that suggests a direction of travel, perhaps. Who knows? It would just be wrong to think that we're a soft target and something that can be hit without an impact, basically.
100%. Steve, great to have you on. Let's speak again. Steve Hawkes is Head of External Affairs at Flutter UK, the world's leading online sports betting and iGaming operator. Thank you to him. And it really does. It's a classic thing that you're going to stick 50p bet on, and you're going to discover you're going to get 55p back because the odds quite literally are stacked against you, not because of the way that the race went or the game or the match, but because somebody lobbed a ton of tax on top of it that wasn't there before. It's mean-spirited, it doesn't read the room, but since when did that stop this government acting in this kind of way? We'll watch with interest. We are about a month away, almost to the day, in fact, of the budget. We shall see. This from Mark on the Isle of Wight: if they tax the betting shops and they all close down, then that will be it for me. No way I am ever betting online. That's another really good point. And certainly many bookmaker companies, Betfred, warned they could shut 1,300 shops, nearly 7,000 retail jobs. And of course, there's other implications for the high street in that as well. I mean, this could be one of those classics that they haven't thought beyond a few figures over there at the Treasury. We will watch and see how this pans out. We have the voice of doom. Hopefully we get a winner. This is The Voice.
Took the decision.
87222, if you've got any idea who that is. Our lines are open right now. This is Talk. Let's get the news at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, it is the home of common sense, and welcome back. Loads going on here. That poll that has really given a public lashing to Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, now ranks above him as the People's Choice for Prime Minister. That's the first time Reform have been above, but the first time as a leader that he's topped the poll. In fact, Keir Starmer dropped so badly, like a stone, to be just 1 point above the Green Party. And they're atrocious. Man alive. More on that. It does beg the question, which UK politician would make the Prime Minister as far as you're... make the best Prime Minister as far as you're concerned? We'll take more calls and comment on that. Also, as you've been hearing, the migrant sex offender mistakenly freed from prison a few days back was paid £500 to leave the UK. The Home Secretary said she shared the public's anger and pulled every lever to remove him. He was, of course, deported to Ethiopia just last night after mistakenly being freed from jail at the weekend and then given 500 quid in cash, reportedly after he threatened to disrupt his removal. Believe me, if somebody handcuffs you and sticks you in a sack with a gag on, you don't cause much disruption on a 747. And the government has slashed forecasts for the amount of electricity it expects wind farms to generate. This is a bit of a blow to Red Ed and his green plans. Officials said they were revising down the predicted efficiency of turbines by more than a quarter as a result of updated modelling, said a spokesman. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. We'll give you the voice of doom answer in just a bit, if we have a correct one. If we have a correct one. Stand by for that. I want to bring you this story as well, which I just referred to. This Ethiopian migrant, you will be familiar with the story. He was arrested and charged with sexual assault, 14-year-old girl and another woman as well. He went to jail. He was only there for about half an hour and then they accidentally freed him. Now, he didn't escape from jail. In fact, the curious part of this story, not that I wish to defend this man in any respect, he actually did say, I think I'm meant to be getting deported. Where do I go? And the authorities sent him to the railway station. So a manhunt went anyway. This week in Parliament, you might remember Robert Jenrick said to the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, Calamity Lammy, said, Calamity, if this man isn't deported by the end of the week, will you resign? Lammy laughed this off, although it has happened, but not without trouble and jip, because not only was he kicked out of this country for good back to Ethiopia, they had to give him £500 because apparently he was threatening to kick off during his deportation. I should remind you, 500 quid is a lot of money. The man is from Ethiopia, where the average wage is £35 a month. So we've given him 14 times the average monthly salary of his home country to go back home. This is bonkers and disturbing on all sorts of levels. Henry Bolton, the international border control expert, is with us just to chew the fat on this one. I mean, I know we use that phrase a lot, Henry, you can't make it up, but really and truly, you could not make this up.
Well, it's now coming to the point where I think it's actually predictable. The system is just so broken that these somewhat shocking pieces of news are no longer surprising. We expect to hear stories of these sort of failures, and that's really the core of the problem here. The system is not functioning.
Yeah.
We are not detaining people when they arrive illegally. We should be, securely, until we can vet them and remove them, or they ask to go back to where they came from. If they are granted asylum, we need to ensure that part of that process is a secure vetting that keeps the British public safe. And we need, of course, to have the sufficient resources and training put into the enforcement side to deal with the illegal working and so on. So there's a whole raft of things which we could probably spend the whole day going through, and that again in itself indicates that this isn't a simple, straightforward problem. And the British public is sitting there having to pay for it all, pay for competence, pay for the poor structures and procedures and legislation, and indeed, to an extent, paying for with their lives. It's got to stop.
It has got to stop, but there doesn't seem to be any genuine political appetite for this when you consider all of the speeches that politicians make, whether it's, you know, Lammy in this case, whether it's a Home Secretary, and we could go back over dozens of them, frankly, Henry, and they would all probably say something rather similar, and Prime Ministers. There doesn't seem to really be that sense of, right, I get this, I'm angry about it, I'm going to stop it.
You're right, absolutely right. And I've said for a very long time, years, that I'm seriously concerned about the quality of people that we've got in politics, in the House of Commons. And of course, then that feeds through to the quality of the people in the cabinet, and indeed, eventually, to the prime ministerial slot, who's occupying that. And what we've got over decades now, we have allowed into the system more and more managers, people who rely on process and procedure, regulation and so on to set the railway tracks. A real leader, statesman, are able to navigate crises and unexpected circumstances. That's their skill. They are exceptional people. We don't want ordinary people leading this government and leading our government departments. We need extraordinary people. Yeah. But we haven't got that leadership there. We've got managers who simply are not intellectually or mentally orientated to courageous decisions, moving into ground that they've not moved into before, or maybe nobody has. So there is no vision, there is no drive, there is no unity of effort, there is none of the things that come from leadership. And that is a serious structural, systemic problem in our political class at the moment, and that has to be addressed. So how do we do it? Well, again, you know, how much time have you got? But
indeed. And if we do deport somebody, what are we doing giving them 500 quid? Because they said, well, you know, if you don't give me some money, I'm going to kick off. I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually sort of know. I'm going to almost use the ministerial phrase there and say I'm not familiar with that figure. But money has been paid for many years to people.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what pot this has come out of, and I don't know precisely why it was given. But this man, given what had happened, given his criminal record, should have been absolutely securely detained on that flight. No ifs, no buts, handcuffed all the way, escorted all the way. But the problem, I suspect, I don't know, is that the security of this individual was actually outsourced to a private security contractor. Would have been somebody like G4S. I'm not pointing the finger at G4S at all, but to give people an idea of what I'm talking about here. A civilian security company, rather than a law enforcement body, the Immigration Service or the police, who are authorised to use force to detain such a person and compel them to move whilst keeping the people around safe. So that's what I suspect has happened, and it's probably that money has come from the pocket of that security company who will claim it back. I don't know.
But yes, it sounds as if it could be in that ballpark, but again, it's a terrible look, isn't it? Listen, Henry, thank you very much as ever. Henry Bolton, International Border Control expert, with us on the programme. 10 minutes, mate, that 11 minutes even after 3 o'clock. Who would make the... which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister? John says, John's in Kent, I like Ian Duncan Smith as Prime Minister, but the next government must be reformed to stop net zero and migration madness. Legal and illegal, we need to stop hemorrhaging taxpayers' money and encouraging manufacturing by removing restrictions and making energy cheaper. It'd be interesting to see what reform's take is on digital ID. I know Nigel Farage said something on the lines of I would go to prison rather than adopt this. But the way I've kind of looked at this is that it's a bigger picture, right? Because if you go down the sort of vaguely conspiratorial route on this, and there's a reason why I say vaguely, because obviously digital ID, it does carry a global component to it, by definition it does. And if other countries are doing the same thing, then there is a kind of database, if you like, of human beings. Now, whilst there are many people perfectly relaxed about that, like there's a database already of passports and birth certificates and driving licenses, to many it smacks of something, a slightly bigger plan in terms of the kind of control we hand over to governments over individuals. And then you get kind of international policy being made, particularly against the backdrop of net zero. So I do get it. I don't buy into the whole kind of, this has been deliberately designed because we're going to be sheep and they're going to do, I don't think it's Brave New World in that sense. It might amount to something that feels like it. This is about making politicians' lives a whole lot easier, and that's how they love it. And they love a database. But given the global element of it, if, for example, the United States are not on board, and they're not, then that's it. The whole thing falls apart. And if Reform UK became the government in 2029, they've said they're not on board with it, and the whole thing falls apart. So you either get everybody or no one at all, unless different countries quite like the domestic applications for it. We'll talk to Sarah in just a second. Before we do, Voice of Doom, day 3 on what we are describing as the most impossible voice we've ever had. Have a listen to the mystery voice. This was who you were asked to identify.
Took the decision.
These were some of the guesses: Engelbert Humperdinck, Dominic Raab, Grant Shapps, Kenneth Williams, Ian Duncan Smith, Tim Farron, Enoch Powell, James Arbuthnot. No, it is none of those. However, and I don't know how this has happened, we have not one but 2 people who've got it correct. Penny in Hampshire and Graham McFarlane, both correctly identified that the answer is Michael Brown. Now, he might not be familiar to everybody. He is still around. He was a Tory. He's now a Brexit Party supporter. He's in his 70s now, but he was the Member of Parliament for Scunthorpe from about 1979 to 83. Scunthorpe, Brigg and Cleethorpes. It kind of changed its name from time to time. Had a bit of controversy, but used to pop up on the TV. I once did the newspaper review with him on Sky or the BBC or something years ago. What I can't work out, can we play that voice again, Amy?
Took the decision.
I mean, well done to Penny and Graham who got that right. How the heck did you get that right? How did anyone listen to that and go, that's Michael Brown, isn't it? Clear as day. That's Brownie. Can we hear it again?
Took the decision.
No, I worked with this man once. I remember him in Parliament. I don't remember. I would never have got that was Michael Brown from that little voice. But Penny and Graham took the decision to come up with the right answer, and they did well. Well done. I mean, it's brilliant. I don't know whether... I guess sometimes with these kind of things, you hear it and you just instantly know. If you don't know to begin with and you keep guessing, maybe it just falls apart. 0344 499 1000. Ian Duncan Smith, yep, there's a guess, there's a suggestion. Penny Mordaunt as Prime Minister, says David in Hull. Ben Habib for Prime Minister all day long, says Mark. Got quite a few people saying Ben would make a good PM. Also, Rupert Lowe is coming up as a popular suggestion as well. Thoughts on that? Mark says, what about Leila Cunningham as Prime Minister? You should get her on. She's on with us all the time. Would be great to hear you two talking. Yeah, we've had her on many times and she will be on again, Mark, so stand by for that. Lots to get through. This is Sarah in Somerset on this same question. Sarah, what are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I feel that it's really important that all the people that come here for refuge from other parts of the world, they want our culture to remain a Western culture with Western values. And we need a PM who's going to robustly defend our Judeo-Christian roots. And that may be a Muslim who defends our Judeo-Christian roots.
Yep.
I would trust Leila, but I would not trust our present Home Secretary. She's very close to Sadiq Khan, who at the moment obviously has been investigated for what he has been covering up. And
well, he says there was no cover. I don't know if he's being investigated, is he? I think people are just making the point that he wasn't up front.
He certainly wasn't up front, and he certainly doesn't seem to have very much respect for the likes of Susan Hall and other women.
No, he really does not like Susan Hall. He doesn't even hide the fact that he cannot stand Susan Hall, and I think it just it's not political difference. It just sounds very rude.
He's incredibly rude and incredibly arrogant. And you see, he thinks that, it's fine that the streets of London aren't safe while he's got his private security. But the money that has been squandered, I don't understand why after 2 Jews were murdered on their sacred day, our PM right now is putting over something like 10 million or something into protecting Islamic mosques, where we have extreme radical Islamists, and there's a difference between Islam and Islamism, because there are some very good Muslims in this country who are horrified at the fact that our government's doing nothing.
100%, and most of them. But you're right. There's a lot of stuff getting a free pass here. Everybody knows there are radical preachers in some of those places. Everybody knows that. The stuff, you can YouTube it and find it. There's some extraordinary voices on those protests that we've seen, Sarah, and people, able to get away with displaying and chanting all manner of nefarious, offensive, racist abuse, and nothing seems to happen.
These mosques need to be defunded. The people who are, unfortunately, there's over 50,000 terrorists on the terrorist watch list. I mean, what modern country in the West thinks that that's okay?
Well, the kind of terrorism we've seen is only coming from one place at the moment. I mean, I appreciate that there was an era where it was coming from other places, and there's history will tell us that narratives change. But right now, if you were to look at every terrorist attack we've had in this country in the last 20-odd years, that's where it's come from. And, that needs to be called out every day of the week. And I think that the Prime Minister, any Prime Minister, should call it out and say what it is. And as you rightly said, Sarah, this is not about decrying all people who follow a faith. In fact, it's not decrying people who follow the faith at all, because I don't think anyone with a straight face would suggest that represents any kind of God or religion. Listen, Sarah, thank you for that. I've got to move for time. 0344 499 1000. That's us. If you want a message, it's 87222. Back with more of your calls coming next on Talk.
Shows that the fear of going out into our community after a certain time, we can't do that. Once at a place where you could walk down and you knew everybody and you could talk, that's gone. The community spirit has gone, and as I said, everyone is angry, upset and frightened, and that's how we now are living our lives. And as it's been said, West Drayton house the most amount of immigrants.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stuart in Perthshire referenced the voice of doom, says, because I was saying, does anybody get some of these voices? Stuart says they're using software that searches the entire internet for the closest voice matches. That's how they do it. We have been onto that for a while. We are aware that there is that capability does sort of exist. We tend to put these things through rigorous tests. We sit down for weeks in advance with the IT department and we go through it, and we have all sorts of things. The CEO of ChatGPT, Grok, Elon Musk is on our committee. We get them to put it through the system to make sure that this is not doable. All right, we don't go quite that far, but yeah, I'm aware that that can happen. But that one would normally elude such a search. It's very generic and it's very short as well. And whilst AI is pretty darn tasty, even though it's in its infancy, just let that point settle, that's quite scary. Even though it's in its infancy, yeah, it could have been that. It could have been the old AI gig that did it. Let's go to Matt in Cheshire. What have you got for us, Matt? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. How many voice of dooms do you think you'll get out of this current crop of Labour MPs, memorable into distant years in the future?
Yeah. The funny thing is, we could probably use the odd current minister and nobody would know who the heck they were.
That's exactly right. I don't think there'll be any of them that will ever be remembered for anything but failure.
Yep.
On the question of the day,
yes.
I mean, obviously, I've been voting for Farage for 15 years, and my only blot on my copybook is I got duped into voting for Boris Johnson because of Brexit.
Yeah.
And I won't ever be voting for any of the three main parties ever again. We keep hearing this thing about experience, and it makes me think, Joe Biden was a politician for 50 years and a former vice president, and Trump's not a politician at all until 10 years ago. Who was the better president? Biden?
Yeah, I know, but the funny thing about Biden, I'm sure there's been documentaries made on Biden, but if you look back at when he was a senator, some of his speeches, this guy was good, Matt. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff. I mean, he wasn't my flavour of politics, but he was good. And bearing in mind, a fairly right-wing Democrat is far to the right of your average Conservative in this country. So, he was stylish, he looked good, he spoke well, some of the passion he had was unbelievable. And then he got old, maybe, it could be that, and he wasn't a good older person, like Trump's old, if you want to look at it that way, but doesn't appear to be. So, yeah, something... Is that under the file of you either got it or you haven't, Matt?
I think everybody was better in those days, full stop, Ian. There were more good statesmen generally.
Yeah.
There's one key factor to all this that nobody has mentioned about reform, and that's Dominic Cummings. He had lunch, apparently, with Farage a few months ago, and he knows the chasms and the back rooms more than anybody, and he's got unsettled business. So all these doubts that people keep having, like, these two main parties, they've been so competent, they've never let us down, they've never failed us. How can we not let them win again? What if reform aren't as good as these two?
That's a good point. But then, Dominic Cummings is interesting. I know somebody who knows him quite well and really rates him. But then there's another school of thought that he's like this kind of slightly bonkers, sort of swotty statistician kind of bloke that sort of appears to... You meet him and think, God, this guy knows loads. But when you drill down, doesn't know that much. And he was only there for, 20 months or whatever. Does he... Or is he some great... Plato-like gift to the Reform Party? Maybe he does know more.
Can he be... I mean, just on the surface, Ian, who's more intelligent? Everybody in the last 30 years who's been in the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, or Dominic Cummings?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I think he'll do well. And one last thing, Ian, I don't think these polls are showing anywhere near the scale of Reform's victory. I'm going to keep saying it until the next election. I'm going to go over 40%, over 400 seats. We've not even begun to see the size of it yet.
No, we haven't. And next year, these local elections, God, I can't wait for those. I mean, I just can't wait for the build up to it and then the final results to see what that offers up. And I know these are local elections, although you've got the Welsh Senate and Scottish Parliament as well thrown into all of the mayoralties around the place too. Even so, I think it's going to be the great tipping point of our time. And if Labour get the wipeout that they are predicted to get, this will be so seismic. There won't be any way back for Labour. They could promise everybody a free 10 grand once a month, and I don't think it'd make any difference. Matt, thank you very much indeed for that. We've got that question running: which UK politician would make the best Prime Minister? A couple of talk presenters have found themselves on the suggest. Angie says the best Prime Minister would have been the late, great James Whale. He would have taken no nonsense. That's very true. But in typical Whale fashion, he might have found himself having to apologise more often than not. Kevin O'Sullivan for Prime Minister, says Ricky in Dudley. You see, Kev would be good. Kev's completely incredulous. If you've listened to Kevin on The Breakfast Show, he's currently doing The Breakfast Show, filling in for Mike Graham, and there he is every morning, sounding, again, as incredulous and as angry as any man can possibly sound. And I think if he was the Prime Minister, I don't know, maybe I could be his assistant, and just the one that says, Kev, calm it down, mate. It's all going to be OK. But you need a bit of that, right? David says, and David's in the Cotswolds, one of the goodies would be good as the next Prime Minister. The country is bananas anyway. Maybe Bill Oddie would work out OK. Cultural reference to I was explaining the goodies to somebody the other day, which many people won't remember. The goodies, who were Bill Oddie, Tim Brooke-Taylor and Graham... Oh, God. You just watch. We're going to have 10,000 messages now. Graham... Garden. Yes. I think Graham Garden was a doctor of some sort. But the goodies were fun. They were kind of a weird kind of comedy outfit in the 70s and 80s. And the goodies were good, right? They're incredibly massive success. Ian's down in London. Ian, good afternoon to you.
On a very light note, the best one for Prime Minister, Blobby, Mr. Blobby. If they were going to call the boat after him, he might as well be Prime Minister. That's
true. I think you're going to say Noel Edmonds then for a second, because he was he was Mr. Blobby's dad.
Yeah. And supposedly my ex-headmaster was Noel Edmonds' father.
But really?
Always went round for years that he was the headmaster at Park Hill. Anyway, right.
was that just a rumour that somebody started? I love this.
Yeah.
That's
anyway,
brilliant.
Right. Truthfully, the biggest problem, I think, for this country, which we haven't even got to the tip of, but it's going to be there soon, she wants to do more on the gambling, she wants to do more on the drink. All that's going to do is open more and more access to criminals.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, because it's going to be more illegal gaming, more illegal selling drugs, more selling drink and all that. The shoplifting has got out of hand, and all it is that sort of way.
Yeah.
It's become a horror show. And do you know what really makes me sick? With that business that happened yesterday in Hillingdon, who's the local MP? Oh, John McDonnell. Did you hear of anything from him about it? Not a word.
Certainly not so far, no. Nothing at all.
No. Who's the one next door to there? Dawn Butler. Again, have we heard anything? No. It's always the same thing. And if they do say anything, it will be blaming the government and the Conservatives and everything else. No, it's what they've done in the past to allow this to happen.
Yeah, spot on.
And I'm sorry, but that's how it is, and that's my biggest worry. Not just for me, but for my kids, my grandkids, and everything else, and my family. That this country has got out of hand. And as they say, like Chloe said, Get Trump in, like get him, because he'll...
So work from home, she said, and I thought, yeah, that could work, couldn't it?
One last thing with that. One thing that if you had that all these council workers work 4 days a week, the next thing is they want a pay rise. Because if they're working 4 days, it means they're out of work for 3 days, which means they want to spend more money. So it's going to be more money they want. Because if they're going to be taxed more, they need more.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, there's no way around that. Basic mathematics. Ian, great call as ever. Thank you, Ian, down in London. 0344 499 1000. More from you in a couple of moments. We're also going to speak to Sean Keach in just a second, who is, of course, the head of science and technology over there at the Sun. There's some incredible stories in this world around at the moment. Stand by for that, including smart glasses. I was talking to somebody who was using them as I was speaking to them the other day. More on that coming up. 3:30, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Andy says, the quote of the week that sums up the state of the country in one sentence was from your own Sam Armstrong, who said, "We've got dumb people running big things." I love that. Yeah. Bang on. I think that's kind of where we're at. Let's take a pause and talk about a completely by way of some, I was about to say light relief, but the world of technology and science and the like, once upon a time was the sort of thing that only made sort of the geek pages or the geek accounts. Now, this stuff is front page news, game-changing, altering the way we live our lives, and there's one man above any other on planet Earth that is right across the detail. He's Sean Keach, head of science and technology at the Sun. Hello, Sean. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. That was a very generous introduction, Ian.
It was all right, wasn't it? Yeah, I was quite proud. I was quite proud of that. I thought it was rather nice. Listen,
I have to slip you a fiver when I see you.
Great to have you with us. Let's talk about. I did a little bit of a tease of smart glasses because smart glasses, interesting one, isn't it, in the world of technology? They were around about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and then they kind of disappeared, didn't they? Google had some glasses out, and people talked about them, or they're going to do all sorts of things. Not quite smart in the way we see it today, but they were certainly going to be the must-have new bit of kit. And then they just disappeared. We never saw them again. You'll remember that. What's changed?
No, I remember trying out the original Google Glass, and I was amazed at the time. I thought, this is incredible. But then again, you know, you put it down and then you sort of forget all about it, because I think at the time when Google Glass was coming out, which was sort of 2013, 2014, that was a time when actually smartphones were really taking off, and they'd sort of reached this mature point where they were amazing, changing our lives, all of these apps coming out. And so I think they were just, the world wasn't ready for them. And then obviously, you know, in the past few years, we've seen Meta do these glasses with the cameras built in. Now you can chat to them with AI. And so we're increasingly seeing them, you know, you've probably seen them, people wearing them out and about. It's, you know, they're increasingly common because I think they are sort of providing that practical usage now. And actually, last week, I was out in California with Amazon at one of their big delivery hubs, sort of near Silicon Valley, a very impressive sort of warehouse. And they've done a pair of smart glasses for their drivers, which is quite interesting because until now, smart glasses have sort of been for consumers, really. But they're trying to dish out all of these smart glasses to their drivers because they're saying that if they give smart glasses to their drivers, the deliveries will be safer, they'll be more efficient. So you'll have all these drivers running around with these glasses on. They've got screens built in. They'll be taking pictures of your doorstep as proof of delivery. They'll have instructions that pop up on the screen showing them where to walk to get to your back garden or your doorstep or through your apartment block. They've got to give them a go, and they're pretty impressive. They'll even warn you if there's a dog on the property, which I thought was quite interesting.
Really? I mean, so this is that it's not like you just get your lenses on the glasses don't turn into just screens, as in your vision is blocked out. They're kind of, is it wording and instructions that are sort of ahead of you, some distance from your eye line? How does that work?
Exactly right. And so it's sort of a few feet in front of your eye line, and it's a sort of holographic system, and everyone seems to have settled on it being the right lens. I don't know why. There's probably a scientific reason for it. But the sort of the text and the imagery pops up on your right lens. In this Amazon case, it's all just sort of like green, sort of Matrix style text in a way. It's very retro. And so you'll get like maps that'll pop up showing you directions. It'll even warn the driver actually if they've dropped off the package at the wrong house, which is quite nice. Because I mean, how many times have you had an alert for a package that pops up and then you find out it's gone to your neighbour's house? So that should reduce. And it sort of gives me hope that, you know, Amazon is famously very ruthlessly cost efficient. So I can't imagine they'd be dishing out these glasses to all of their drivers if they didn't think that actually it would help make deliveries more efficient. Because I mean, obviously very tight-fisted.
The bit about taking the photograph with the glasses does make some sense, because let's be honest, we're all fed up with standing there posing with a parcel in your hand at your own front door while some bloke whips his phone out to take a picture of you.
Absolutely. And quite interestingly, also when they're in the van, the cameras kick in and it'll highlight the packages that they're meant to pick up to bring to your door. So the camera runs even when they're in the back of the van. The only time that the camera switches off, actually, the glasses switch off entirely, is when the van is moving. So it's just a purely on-foot thing. I thought it was quite interesting. So hopefully we should be getting more efficient package deliveries.
Yeah, you've tested the Meta glasses as well, haven't you?
Oh yeah, they were much better. And then you can actually buy those. So obviously, the Amazon ones are just for delivery drivers. The Meta ones are very impressive. They're out in the US now. I think they're coming to the UK in early 2026, about £700 or £800. And they're full colour, so it's not just that boring green text. And you'll be able to tap into proper apps like Instagram. You can watch videos on it. You can use WhatsApp to send and receive text messages. You can use proper maps to walk around the streets. And again, like you say, you're not blocking out what you're seeing. It's not like a virtual reality headset you put on and you can't see anything. It's just a little overlay on your vision. And actually, it's quite bright, so that even if you're like staring at the sky and it's a bright day, you can still see what you're looking at. So
wow.
It's pretty impressive.
I mean, I can see, because GPS and sat-nav, in the car makes more sense than when you're on foot, because we've all done that thing of coming out of a railway station and you look at your phone and it says, and I don't know why it does this, Sean, it says head northwest, and you think, which way is northwest? How do I know which way is northwest? I've got no idea. I mean, sometimes once you get moving, it'll say do a left, do a right. But the head north or head southeast or whatever, as always, I mean, I've ended up in postcodes I really shouldn't be in, Sean.
So you're absolutely right. And it's so often it will get the angle that you're facing completely wrong. And so what me and my wife tend to do is that when we come out of a train station or somewhere unfamiliar, we'll just start walking in a direction straight away, because then we can just get that calibration right away and we know which way we're moving.
So you don't hang around. Yes.
Just go, just walk, and then you work it out.
That's the kind of the zone of uncertainty, when you just get out the station and stop before the GPS has worked out where you are and what angle Yeah, I like what you've done there. You see, it's almost as if you work in this world, Sean, and know what you're talking about.
If you take nothing else from today, Ian, that's my single tip.
Don't stand there in the zone of uncertainty, as we shall now call it forever. Talking of Amazon Prime giving away some free benefits. What's this all about?
Oh, this is a good one. It's a gaming one, but it's not just for gamers. So stay with me here. But if you're a Prime member, you get this freebie now called Amazon Luna, which is basically a sort of Netflix for video games. It includes 50 video games, including Hogwarts Legacy, which is a pretty expensive game normally. But 25 of the games are called game night games. And they're basically when you've got friends or family around. You use your phones as controllers, and there's this brilliant game which is starring Snoop Dogg. It's actually an AI game, and he sort of presides over a court case starring you using AI. And so you'll all sort of speak into your microphones, and one of you will be a plaintiff, one of you will be a defendant, and you'll have character witnesses, and you'll sort of chat with him, and then he'll make judgments on your case. And I was playing it this weekend with some friends at the Cotswolds, and it was great fun. We did 2 or 3 court cases, brilliant.
Wow.
Fibbage and Taboo, which are quite popular board games, they're also on there for free as well. So it's nice. It's a nice bit of fun. You don't have to pay anything if you're a Prime member, just included with your membership. So if you go onto your Amazon Fire Stick or your Fire TV or your Smart TV, just look for the Amazon Luna app, and it's free. Just plug in your Amazon details, and you'll be able to play 25 games for free with your friends and family. They can't give you the friends, unfortunately. You've got to bring your own friends.
I might give it a go on the train on the way home. It might be. I'll have to look for the solo games, but we'll see how it rolls. I'll bring you the evidence of or the results of what happened, Sean. We're talking about all this technology, and of course, you know, it's amazing, and we live in that world because, you know, it's often said once the computer chip was designed, then everything was going to change forever, and it would always, technicians and scientists and innovators will always find new ways and applications of changing things, and you can't stop people with those kind of brains inventing, even if half the stuff we don't really need, but we quite like it. I mean, do we really need to exist as a human race with special glasses with instructions on how to walk up the road? But, you know, these are geeky stuff. There is a downside, of course, to the world we are currently entering, the world of AI and interconnected digital science and the like, and that is that fewer people will be employed, and that's generally seen to be a problem across the board. We've seen this week, we've been talking great stories about Amazon, but there's a slightly more negative one here, because despite their successes, they're actually getting rid of people in the thousands.
This is a story right across Silicon Valley, really. It's ironic because these tech companies have never had high valuations. People are pouring money into them. They're making record profits. And you're right, Amazon this week announced that they're reducing their global corporate workforce by 14,000 roles. As Amazon employs somewhere in the region of 1.5 million people across the world, an enormous company. About 350,000 of those are corporate jobs, and that's what's affected by these layoffs, so 14,000 roles. And they've put out this big blog post from their senior VP of People, Beth Galetti. She said, "This generation of AI is the most transformative technology we've seen since the internet. It's enabling companies to innovate much faster, and we're convinced that we need to be organized more leanly with fewer layers and more ownership." So they're saying they want to reduce bureaucracy. They're trying to cut out that sort of layer of middle management. But obviously, it's an enormous layoff. Yeah. And I think really what it comes down to is that these tech companies are very keen to operate like startups, because you're seeing in Silicon Valley these very small companies that are getting huge amounts of investment. I mean, just look at the growth of OpenAI, which created ChatGPT. You know, companies can start very small and then suddenly be getting billions of dollars. And I think these big companies are very, very panicky that they're moving too slowly. They can't operate efficiently. And so that's why you're seeing these massive layoffs across these tech companies, because they're very worried that the small companies are going to usurp them, or certainly usurp parts of their businesses. So 14,000 people, they're saying that they're going to get severance pay, they'll get an opportunity to find a new role internally. But I think gone are the days where these sort of tech companies are a job for life. I think it's a sort of bit of a deal with the devil. You know, you join and the compensation is incredible, but you are very much at risk of being caught up in one of these massive layoffs. 14,000, 30,000, 20,000 people. It's quite unprecedented.
Indeed, and of course the world of AI will get its claws and tentacles into all sorts of areas where the upshot might be the same. Somebody said to me at the weekend, Sean, something I'd never thought about before, but it kind of frightened the life out of me. Said that as AI, you and I have used this expression before, when it comes to AI, and we're looking at the amazing things that it can do, but this is week one. You know, we're at first base on AI. We haven't yet got anywhere near what this is going or how this is going to transform the world. A guy said to me, you do realise that with AI, when it's on full capacity, there'll be no secrets. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, there'll be no state secrets. That will be impossible because AI will just be able to give you such an accurate guess what has gone on that it will be, you know, pretty tip-top. And I thought, well, OK, that's open to a bit of debate. But he also said, but it'll be the same with friends and family, because if you've got something you're not telling a friend and they're desperate to find out, a few key words into AI, when it's really at that level, and a few analytics doing the job, will give you, in the law of probability, yes, your girlfriend is cheating on you with the Amazon man, you know, the fellow with the glasses, that kind of thing. It's going to be able to come out and tell you that, and it will be almost a dead cert that it's got it right. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. I think it's a very difficult privacy situation. And not to go off on a massive tangent here, but also what people are worried about from a privacy perspective is quantum computers, which are these computers that will be able to make enormous calculations much faster than regular computers. And they're worried that in the future, these quantum computers will be so good that they'll be able to break the current encryption we have on all of the, you know, social media platforms, texts, because to them it will be a very simple puzzle to solve in a way that currently it would take computers, you know, hundreds of thousands of years to crack. So that's one of the big problems facing your privacy. And then, of course, AI as well. You know, if it's ingesting private information, I mean, we see leaks all the time, just, you know, through regular social media platforms. I think once that data starts getting chucked into AI systems, it'll be much easier for cyber criminals to pass what's going on in your life. And then, you know, ultimately, as you say, you probably will have situations where people use it to spy on each other. And I think it comes down to the platforms regulating stop that from happening.
Well, that would be the only hope. But of course, people will have their little workarounds. But he mentioned that as well, quantum computing, along with AI and all that goes with it. It's going to be a really bizarre world that we live in. And
I think it's quite interesting on the regulation point as well, because, I mean, AI is so complicated. And look how difficult it's been to regulate really what are very simple apps like Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. You know, they're not particularly complicated, and yet it's been a nightmare for the past sort of 2 decades to try and regulate them in any meaningful way. So it doesn't give me a lot of hope that we're going to do a good job with AI, but, you know, fingers crossed, Ian. Maybe AI can lead us forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, it may well turn out that AI becomes, you know, divides up between AI and super AI, you know, and you show your allegiance, like, you know, do you support Chelsea or Liverpool? You'll have your preferred AI that can do better than the other AI. Who knows? My favourite tech story of the week, however, has to go to Nike and their new trainers, because they've done something here that I think clearly, it might be early stages, I don't know, you can tell us, Sean, but clearly the shape of things to come. What have they been up to in the foot-wearing department?
Nike has created robot shoes, which sounds bonkers, and it is a bit bonkers, but they're real. They've tested it on 400 runners, and basically they help you run, jog, walk. So it looks like a regular shoe, but then it sort of has an ankle mount at the top that wraps around your ankle, and then it sort of moves in sync with your leg robotically. They're calling it a second set of calf muscles. So they're saying it'll make it easier to move. You'll be able to run for longer. It'll be able to quicken your pace. And then ultimately, if you don't want the robot bit on, you can whip it off and wear them like normal trainers. But they're sort of comparing it as to an e-bike for your feet, and you know, it's sort of like a very small chunk of an exoskeleton in a way. You know, you'll be able to run for miles, run much faster, and you know, maybe one day you can just sprint to work instead of hopping on the tube or driving in your car.
I remember Elon Musk saying years ago in an interview, and I can't remember the context, but he said we're part cyborg already. What he was talking about was wearable technology, essentially. And it's kind of true that if you think about, you know, you've got your watch on, you've got your glasses and your trainers. That is, you know, the kind of stuff we would have watched in an old sci-fi movie where, you know, wow, look what they do. You've got superhumans because they've got special feet and they've got special powers with their eyes, and the special powers they can do with, they can regulate their heart by looking at their watch, etc. All of this stuff is flipping real, Sean.
Absolutely, and AirPods, I think, are actually quite a good example of this, because a lot of people now will just have their AirPods in, all day long, and it sort of, in a way, does feel a bit like an early form of bionic man. I think what's interesting here is this sort of like augmenting your body with robotics. Previously, that was sort of, you would see that in the medical field, to help people walk again, or the military field of, can we create super soldiers? But this, I think, is quite a good example of, actually, this is just purely for consumers. This probably isn't going to be used in competitive racing, because they're not going to allow it. This isn't a medical or military thing, although I suppose you could use it for that. This is just going to be aimed really at regular people who want to walk a bit easier, walk a bit further, run a bit faster.
I might get the attachments for my lilac Air Jordans, high tops. We'll have to see. Listen, Sean, always good to have you on with us. Thank you, Sean Keach. He is head of science and technology over there at the Sun. Check out his pages online. There's a lot of stories like that. More to come from him over the coming weeks as well. We're back with you for more comment in a couple of moments' time. Just gone 10 to 4. This is Talk.
Can I just say...
There is a nauseating irony listening to Sadiq Khan, this pious, horrible man who for so long has deflected, failed to answer the question as to whether there are sexual grooming gangs operating in London. And now, of course, the Metropolitan Police are telling us that they've got 9,000 cases they're looking at.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Tom Paul does crack me up sometimes. Thank you, Tom. 0344 499 1000. Let's get over here to Richard down in London. On that issue of best prime ministers, Richard, what are you making of this? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
I think there's a kind of steam, there's a kind of almost unstoppable train behind Reform and Farage at the moment. But I would just remind people, if he was that good, he would have been able to have predicted that Brexit actually it would not necessarily lead to our being able to control our borders, because the reality is, I can name you 2 countries that are in the European Union who do a very good job of controlling their borders.
Hungary and Poland.
Poland and Hungary. And actually there are 10 countries now, I think, that are obviously looking at what's gone wrong in France and England, and they're taking...
Are they in a more... I'm only asking this because I don't know, Richard, but are they in a more advantageous position because they're... I mean, oddly, you'd think being an island would work in our favour, but it hasn't, because people row over here, and when they get here, they stay.
I think they've clearly, Ian, they see the European Court of Human Rights decisions as being advisory, and our political class does not. Tony Blair in 1997 basically merged our Human Rights Act with the European Court of Human Rights. So whatever the European Court of Human Rights says is God. Now, this is something, to be honest with you, Ian, this is a collective failure, because actually, obviously we can all think, well, in a way, Brexit was almost a waste of time. But my other point is we're looking for politicians who offer easy answers. Now, to move on to the grooming gangs, it's the most horrible scandal I think that we've ever had in this country, certainly for hundreds of years. But what it tells us is that we have problems of integration. And also, Ian, what's become clear the last few weeks is that the left-wing blob simply will not accept this. So we're not just divided in terms of the fact that we've got arguably we've got groups that have come here that are not integrated. We are divided in actually, as a country, there are people who, if you like, indigenous people who are insisting that there's no problem here because they believe in the social engineering. Now, we haven't had a politician who told us that multiculturalism wouldn't work since Norman Tebbit. You've got to go back about 30 years.
Yep.
So my point is, yes, people talk about being let down by Labour and by the Conservatives, but they voted for Blair 3 times, so they bought into multiculturalism. And in terms of the Conservatives letting people down, well, is that really the case? They said they would. They voted in 2010 to reduce the deficit, which they basically did. They voted in 2015